ukuthola ukuthi live vele nemambala liphokopheleke esigabeni semave lathuthukile lokunyenti ke lesitakucaphuna kulesigaba sekucala lapho khona ke sikhulumisa wona lamaphakelo indvuna engakawethuli sifuna nje kubuka sicathanise lokwendekile kumbe eminyakeni wanga 2018 2019 financial year naloko ke lokwendekile ku 2019 2020 financial year kude kusinikete isithombe ukuthi ngabe yini ke lesikubhekile indvuna ke itiko letemafa lengendeke ekubeke ke etafuleni ngenhloso ukuthi kumbe kugucule ema challenges neku capitalize on opportunities that we have been articulated to by His Majesty King Eswatini III on his recent speech from the throne. Libandla lengihleti nalo ke bekunene libandla lemadvodza lacocodzeleke ke kuto ke letindzaba tekuhlatiya ke umnotho nekubuka lokuthi ke live lingabambiseka kanjani ke tindzabeni ukuthi emasu kumbe achamuke ke afakwe ngasekudla sami ngenaye ke Dr. George Chongwa simsebenzisile ke naseminyakeni lophelile lapho khona ke sibonile ukuthi lwati lwakhe ke luyasisita kuzivula ke ingcondvo noma kumbe kubuka tintfo ngendlela letsite. He has a PhD in economics, is Dr. George Chongwa. Bese ke ngesekudla sakhe ke kuba ke naThemba Inkosi Dube nanaye ke lo economist umlandvo wakhe ke cishe siyubonile imihla ngemihla uyadisebenta ke tindzaba letibukayo ukuthi ke isimo setimali nesemnotho emhlabeni nalesekhaya ke Eswatini kuhamba kanjani. Ngidawapha ke lithuba emathosa ngwavusela Dr. Chongwa. A very good morning and welcome to yet another edition of Eswatini TV's analysis of this year's budget speech.
Thank you very much, Mr. John, and a very good morning, dear viewers countrywide.
Thank you so much once again, Dr. Chongwa, for coming through, and we believe we are going to have a meaningful engagement as we look closer into events of the past financial year and that of the other past financial year, together with what we may expect from the minister this year. Babe Dube, angubingelele nyamatane nguphe lithuba lesuvusela maswati.
Ngiyabonga John ngiyakubingelela ngiyakuvusela futhi ngiphindze ngibingelele umbukeli ekhaya. Ngimukele ehlelweni lesicala ukukhuluma kulo namhlanje.
Kunjalo sale vele ngithatha kuwe nyamatane ngibonga nje lithuba lokuthi nawe udinikile isikhathi kuvela emsakadweni namuhla kuthi awusibambisa ngidawuthi sihlinza indlovu inkulu kakhulu lenzaba lesikhulumisako lomuhla lokukhulu kumbe lesingakubuka Dube ukuthi singakangeni kulamaphakelo emaphakelo alomnyaka siwathathela kumbe emlonyeni wengwenyama kule ikhulumile iphefumulela umhlaba iphefumulela iParliament ukuthi live aliphuma libhekephi kumbe nje ungasithi cabcabu ngalokube ngema highlights kumbe lesingakubheka lokutawendeka indvuna isalungisa isetawuphinze iwethule emaphakelo ayo kulonyaka.
Angibonge John, siyabonga kakhulu sijabulile kakhulu ukuthi ingwenyama isiphefumulele nayivula iParliament emavikini ledlulile lapho khona abekasikhulumisa sisive wase weba nenkulumo la ishoko esiveni. Kunengi lakhulumile lokuhle, it is a visionary speech lesikhuluma si-embrace everything lesikhulu kakhulu lesifuna ke ukuthi thina lesikhona la ngaphasi bese siya khona ukuthi siphushuteke noma ke senteke, but it's a big speech la khulume ngako ngeke ngu-highlight konke. I think even Dr. this side will add and elaborate on some of the bullets that I will talk about. My focus kakhulu isenzabeni ye-revenue la khulume ngayo, which is of a challenge to the country. Lokho ukuthi kufanele live likhona kusimama likhona ukuthi litiphilele libe independent. Lokho imvo lemcoka noma ngikuphi nje in any environment ukhuluma ngokuthi we have to prioritize i-revenue collection lokufaka ikhathi indzaba yema taxes lefaka ikhathi nato tonke indlela letikhona uhulumende lanato lekucokelela imali ukuthi tingene embusweni. And then there is the other issue who is talking about the issue of the expenditure control, which is really an issue ukuthi how do lo lesesiqokelele sikusebenzise ngendlela letawusita ukuthi isebenze kube beneficial for the country futhi kungadlabhatiseki, which I think it's very important. Sibonile in the country there's quite a lot that has happened. There's the anti-corruption commission labazama nabo ukuthi kubakhute tintfo letingalungi letigcina tifaka ikhathi lokuthi imali inisebenziseke ngendlela letingafanele. So that was one of the thing lengithanzile latikhulumile ngato. The other thing lisengumuva la phambili le point lelo because le revenue is the issue ye economic growth. where he was talking about the economic growth, that the prospect as that the increase will be 2.1 for the year 2020, which is quite interesting. So now wanaga ke ma-reports lamaningi vele akhuluma ngayo, ngisho ne-IMF ikhuluma ngokukhula komnotfo leMaswati. But one important thing, because ama-sectors lakhona in the economy, there are three. There is the primary sector, which is the agriculture, anything that uses mining, anything that uses the general natural resources just from the raw state. That will be your primary sector. And then so khuluma ke nge-secondary sector, which includes manufacturing, of which is the sector I think ilaba khulumile ngayo, which is, I think we will dwell on it later. The other sector is tertiary, which is basically services, banking, IT, just generally services. But angibuyele kule issue ye manufacturing la khuluma ngayo ukuthi it's a sector ledzinga ukuthi ikhuliswe. This is a very important sector for any economy. Nangakubalela iminotfo lemikhulu emhlabeni, khuluma ngabo Japan, khuluma ngabo America, khuluma ngabo UK, khuluma ngabo Germany. They've actually focused go manufacturing sector, because nasikhuluma manufacturing sector, ngile sector that takes the raw material and brings it together to bring a product. So lokhu bese ke sekwenta ukuthi siqhubekele phambili sisive ukuthi now you'll be able to create le machine lenta leyo nto leyo. Once you get there, you are gone. I'll give you an example of amavela amakhulu like China. Those are able to create the machine bayakhe and they go. So as a country, we should look into a way how we develop our manufacturing. Currently, we are focusing on sugar, and we're also focusing on sugar, and I think there are three commodities that we're focusing on.
The concentrate as well.
Yes, the concentrate, drinks, and I think there's the other one is the manufacturing of paper products. That's another major thing that we do in terms of the manufacturing that actually contributed to the last quarter manufacturing for the country. I think as a country we need to focus on that. There's quite a number of things that have happening.
You are basically saying in a nutshell there is room for improvement, and we need to strengthen the manufacturing sector and to see how we can diversify or even grow it. But I just want to come to you quickly, Dr. Chongwa. His Majesty, when he made his preamble in the speech, he says the beginning of the year 2020 is also the beginning of a new decade, and he further said, we thank God the Almighty for having been with us throughout the past decades, but this marks the beginning of a new decade and the beginning of new things. As an economist, could you sort of take us back to the decade that was, in terms of how the economic situation was in the past 10 years, because this then gives us an opportunity to anticipate how the new decade and its new beginnings are likely to be?
Well, basically, if we go back the trend of 10 years or 5 years, if we can start, you realize that our economy has not been growing above 3%. Which is not very
It's
good.
characteristic of the past 10 years.
Yes, on average, it has not been going about 3%. It's been maybe 2.9, 2.8, and at least it brought us hope. Like for the past 3 years ago, it was even growing less than 1%. It was really, really devastating, especially in the previous financial year. I remember even the Minister of Finance said that we're in trouble because of ABCD. We're in trouble because the economy had a very poor outlook. But after having worked hard as a government, we have seen the economy coming back to the way of development, and it has a projection of 2.6% GDP growth. Now, this means a lot. If we achieve 2% GDP growth, which means we are almost on an average of an African country, because Sub-Saharan African percentage growth is between 2 and 3.5%, except in countries like Ethiopia, Tanzania, and now Mauritius, which is growing between 4 to 7%. Like Tanzania is growing at 7% per year.
We are talking, sorry, just to interject, Dr. Chongwa. It is easy for members of the public to say, this government has failed Eswatini. We are saying in the past 10 years our economy has grown. Its economy has grown with less than 3%. And to sort of like blame the government for its inefficiencies. But the truth, and His Majesty attests to this in his speech from the throne, he says, we are a country that is not isolated from the activities and the events of the world economy. What are some of these major world activities or events that have affected us also as a country? Because it is easy to just think it is Eswatini that is unique to this kind of problems, you know. But whereas the truth is, like His Majesty was saying in his speech, you know, we need to look at the situation on a global scale. What are some of these major activities that we've witnessed in the past 10 years that have also affected us as a country?
Okay, especially the financial market sector has always remained volatile.
Yeah.
And once it remains volatile, it sends a lot of fear to the potential investors. Currently, we had a problem in South Africa. Remember, the South African economy for the past 5 years, it had serious threats. And Swaziland, Eswatini is pegged. So those negative implications affected us, number one. The number two, this element of saying the government has failed us, it's not the best, because in economics is what we call GDP per capita, gross domestic product per person, in other words. You, as an individual, what are you doing to contribute to the well-being of the economy? Let's say, for example, our country has got the largest wage bill, meaning a lot of people are employed by government. So at the end of the year, at the end of the month, so much money goes to pay human labor, isn't it? Now, if that human labor is not productive enough, who is failing the country? It's us again. So, which means it goes back to the model which they used in Rwanda. In Rwanda, it was basically a performance-based model, because a human being who is employed by government must not just be a parasite, but must be a resource in order to make and improve productivity at the end of the day. So when His Majesty says that, listen, all of us, we must change the way we think, meaning it will be a very productive country if we have employees and non-employees who are innovative and creative at the same time. Let's take, for example, not to talk too much, you are a government employee and you are abusing government resources. Those resources, they cost money.
Yeah.
One, monetary issue. The number two, there's what we call opportunity cost, the cost of foregoing other things. So you are destroying the resources, you are destroying the money. At the end of the day, the entire economy dwindles down.
Of course.
So if I do this and we are 1,000 of us who are doing that kind of behavior, then definitely we are going down. We will not be productive as a country.
Yeah, and I think your views, Mr. Dube, in terms of the things we need to do. His Majesty, when he says this is the beginning of a new decade, he talks about issues of renewal, meaning we need to do things differently now, you know. What are some of the opportunities and the new beginnings we are likely to see the new government? And I think, of course, the budget is going to be indicative of those things.
It's quite an interesting area in the new beginnings. I think what I think government is going to do, maybe before I forget, is that I want to echo what Doctor was saying here on the issue of, you asked the question on the global economic factors that has really actually hit on us as a country. Although we are operating in a global economy, we're part of the whole
larger economy.
Yeah. So whatever happens in the States, you might think what is happening in the United States has no effect. For instance, we're talking of the coronavirus. You can think, it's in China, miles and miles away, I don't mind about it. But it has a direct impact on what we do. We import things from China. There is petrol or fuel that we purchase, which is also a global commodity. Its prices are linked to what is happening in China. Quite a number of things. Those things that happen, they affect our economy. Back in the 2008 and 2007, there was the credit crunch. We were hit as a country. That was the biggest blow to us as a country. So some of these factors are actually exogenous. They just happen outside and we suffer. So I want to come on the new beginning now. When you're talking about the new beginnings, I believe as a country we were doing things maybe in a traditional way, but what we are bringing now is a refreshed way, that now let's start a new beginning and focus, kind of like a refocusing or bringing a focus on some of the things that we're maybe not focusing, giving much attention in the past.
Of course. And I think, like I said earlier on, we need to look at how our economy has fared in the past 2 years, 2 financial years, which is the year 2018-2019, contrasting it with the year 2019-2020. How has things really looked like in terms of government allocations and expenditure? This gives us an indication to say, or a view to project that when the minister delivers his speech this morning in Parliament, this is how likely things are going to be looking like.
We thank the Almighty God and our ancestors for protecting and guiding us as we enter the new year 2020, the start of a new decade and era which signifies new beginnings.
Bekunene sibonga uNkulunkulu nemadloti ngekusivikela nekusihola sisangena eminyakeni lomusha wa 2020. Ngumnyaka wekuqala kulesigungu seminyaka lelishumi letako lokuyinkomba yekuqala kabusha.
It's time to use your gifts and talents to accomplish your goals.
Lesi sikhathi sekuthi nisebenzise tipho nemathalenta enu kuthi niphumelele kuloku lelikufisako.
We therefore anticipate a renewal in all things as we remain united in the common purpose to pursue our economic and social development agenda as a Maswati.
Ngakho ke sibheke kwenteka kabusha kwato tonke tintfo sibe sibambene ngamoya munye ekufezeni kusimama kwemnotfo nencubekela phambili kanye nenhlalakahle yethu singeMaswati.
Umuntu nje utabesolwa kalikhuda ke libayethe kuye ke lo mutse welive ikakhulukade lenkulumo mawilalela iphinze yilethe kabusha ke emcondweni nasetinhlitweni imibuto nekudibutisisa ukuthi ngiliswati mina ngenda ini. Dr. Chongwa, these words I can't get them out of my mind and I'm not sure and I wish Amaswati could hear them again and again and again. Yeah. His Majesty says that it is time to use your gifts and your talents to accomplish your goals. Your views, what is His Majesty saying? Who exactly was he talking to? And how are we likely to see the 2020-2021 budget indicate the aspirations of the King as far as this statement is concerned?
Thank you. That's a very powerful question. And first of all, it can be seen into two dimensions. Number one, you can look at it from the micro perspective or the household perspective, which is basically the mind-changing element. His Majesty says it's now time for us to use our talents and our gifts to accomplish our goals, isn't it? Now, for example, our gifts, a gift is something that you never applied for. It's an endowment. So that now buys into the natural resources element part of it. How are we looking at what we have with us and how can we turn it upside right? So this now boils down to the issues of the mind setting. So at household level, what mindset should we have as Eswatini, as our emblem? The number two, from the micro perspective, which is a government level now, what policies are we having that are participatory and realistic? From the development economic perspective, most African countries, unfortunately, we are not realistic in setting out our priorities. If you look at the China case, 50 years ago, China had a 50-year plan. And the basic priority which they had, it was simply the mindset. And today, China is competing. It's a global, it's a global icon.
Yeah.
So I think
second biggest economy in the world.
So His Majesty is talking about, according to me, participatory governance. Yeah. Participatory governance is not only things for politicians or policymakers.
Sorry, just to cut you short, Dr. Chongwa. This is not just a statement where His Majesty was sort of like acting as a motivational speaker. Yes, he was, but he was also giving a directive to the Minister of Finance. You know, my question to you was, what are we likely to see in the budget that the Minister of Finance has taken a word from this statement to say, the King was saying it's time to use gifts and talents. You know, sometimes gifts and talents require resources, you know. Yeah. Where are we likely to see the minister channeling resources towards enhancing gifts and talents across the country?
Yes, it goes into human capital empowerment.
Yeah.
Yes, the youth, entrepreneurship, we already have infrastructure. We have actual infrastructure. Have already achieved that level. Actually, like even World Bank testifies to that. I think we have to inject much on the human capital part so that the human capital becomes productive.
Yeah, Babetube. live la kangwane kuyavela nakuyo ke inkulumo yalomuthe lenye ke yeti insayele ebhekene nato indzaba ye unemployment and mawubuka kakhulu ama demographics elive bantu labanengi 60% of the population comprises of young people and most of these young people are actually educated with graduates and so on and so forth, you know. This statement where the king says it's time to use gifts and talents, you know, how can this statement be actually converted or utilized to channel resources towards people, young people that are unemployed in this country, to cap the rate of unemployment? And what are we likely to see the minister do or channel resources towards in terms of making sure that there's capacity around the unemployment sector in the country?
Ngiyabonga John. Inkulumo yenkwenyama kule ma-talent netipho, I think ngiyona ingcikiti yekhula nje kwelive ngasilo laseSwatini. I want to bring it to the micro perspective lapha kakhuluma ngayo dokotela ngakho ukuthi kukulo muntu, if we can understand that, maybe I'll just go back a little bit ukuthi umuntu nawutala akutala nje makwakho uthi ngwa God ukuletha la emhlabeni, you have a talent and a gift as a way of life. That thing will work for you even if you are educated or not. So we sinankulunkulu lo responsible. He has never brought anybody kulo mhlaba wangakhona ukuthi amnike indlela yokuphila. So when I like it's a very powerful statement, because if we can all zero into our talents and our God-given talents, yes. I mean, I wouldn't mind what he's doing. I will focus on what I'm doing because this is my mission. So it basically makes you to focus on your calling, if I can use the church word, on your calling, which is actually something that will drive the economy to the better end. So when we take it out of the spiritual part and we just come back on the natural, is that we're looking at the minister, as you say, about unemployment, which is very, very high, to the graduates. I mean, that's the most pathetic part. From UNISWA, the different colleges around and universities, I think there will be an increase in the youth fund. Maybe
we may realize an increase in the youth fund.
Yeah, we might realize an increase, and then I think also there will have to be more on the education, but focusing mostly on the vocational training. Yeah. Which I think brings now the element of the talent.
Yeah, I think I as a journalist, you know, or as a news person or information person, I have a way of analyzing words and the context they bring, or the outlook they bring. When we say unemployment levels are high in the country, I think for me automatically it creates a mindset where we are saying to people they must go out and look for jobs. Yeah. You know, I don't know if there's any other way to actually define this, so that at least when we are saying people are unemployed, we are not basically saying people must go and look for jobs. We are actually trying to say people are unproductive. Yes. And they must find means to be productive. Yeah. Is this economically correct in its context to say the unemployment level or rate in the country? Dr. Chonga, maybe this question you can answer, you know. Is it still correct to say the unemployment level, you know? Because I think, like I'm saying, for me it says people must be absorbed by the employment sector, whereas there could be other means to absorb people to become productive.
Yes. I like the way you've analyzed it, actually. Unemployment does not necessarily mean that anyone should be in a company working. Unemployment, we are talking about income generation.
Yeah,
it's the issue is the income generation, like what Tanzanian economy has done. It has got the best model actually on this one. Now, one time I even suggested that all what government should do is to identify any person who is self-employed to start with, but this person is generating income. So after you identify them who are self-employed, give them subventions to motivate them remain to be self-employed. That is, you're increasing productivity, so that at the end of the day we'll have a larger number of people who are able to look after themselves through direct self-employment and indirect employment through companies or other organizations. Now, let me just have a flashback to what His Majesty said, that now is the time to use all what we have for us to attain growth. This statement, this is now very important. This statement was mentioned in 1940s. In 1940s, when the European economy had crashed, and then the French-speaking government came out and said, now it is time to use whatever we have to come out. That is how the word entrepreneur came out. So His Majesty's statement, to me, I relate it to the element of entrepreneurship. Government must think like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
People must now think like entrepreneurs. Then as a result, we'll be like China in the long run.
I think I will need to come back to you so you can reinforce this scenario in Europe. Bekulena asesiphindze sicaphune ke kuyo ke inkulumo yengwenyama. Kodwa ke singakangeni maswahla amahle kunatisa nje ukuthi singatitshela ke hlobo tethu nebangani lethi semsebentini naletinye kumbe letingekho ke kubomabona kutse kuthi ke siyatholakala ke ku YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel. As long as you've got data on your phone, you can tune in on the Eswatini TV channel lapho khona ke sikhombisa khona ke ukuthi kwendekani ekhaya ke Eswatini, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com ngiqondise lapho bekunene is youtubechannel.com/CUI noma ke uye ke ku www.swazitv.co.za utawuthola ke kusakadwa kwaloku ke lesikwenda utolandzelela lenkulumo. Ngiyeke ngibeke baswahla amahle ukuthi leli vesta lakhathini leli ngekukhulumisana ngekufaka ke imicondvo ngekuvuleka ke imicondvo ke kumbe kulokunye asesithole ke ukuthi ke ingwenyama icaphunene futhi ke lokunye lokusenda ukuthi ke sifuna kubuka ukuthi ngabe sitakukhanza yini kuwo ke maphakelo alonyaka indvuna Neil Rickenback mayiwethula ke ukuthi ke mathudane eParliament.
In the medium term, overall growth is projected to be 2.6%, which shows a significant growth from last year's projection. This development is driven by the manufacturing sector, which is benefiting from anticipated continued positive exports of the country's goods to our trading partners.
Ngekubuka kwethu enzimeni lesekhathi nekhathi kuthuthuka kwetinhlangothi tonke bekubheke ukuthi kube ingcenye lengu-2.6 ekhulwini. Lokukhomba kuthuthuka na uqhathanisa nekweminyaka lophelile. Le mvuthuko ikhwethelwa nguleteluhlangothi lwemikhiqizo loluzuzwa ekuqhubekeni kwaleto tekuphuma kwemikhiqizo yalelive etihlotsheni lesithengiselana nato.
We need to therefore manage all risk within our domestic economy to ensure sustainable growth.
Ngakho bekunene sidinga ukuqaphela konke lokungasifaka engotini emnothweni wasekhaya. Sende isiqiniseko sokuthi umnotho uyakhula bekunene.
Bayethe wena waphakathi ngwenyama maswahla amahle icela ke live nalababuke ke kusebenta ke kodinhlelo dakhe ke uhulumende ukuthi baqaphele ke tindvo letingalimata lomnotho welive la kangwane. Sinkulumo ke lenkulu kakhulu lena balingani bami lengihleti nabo e-studio sebakuvetile ke lokunye lokufaka ekhathi ke indzaba yekudlabhatiswa kwema resources ahulumende lokungafaka ekhathi ke indzaba ye-corruption lekungiletinye ke letindvo letenda ukuthi ukhanze ukuthi live lakithi ke sesilikhomba ukuthi ngathi ke lifuna kuyahlaba phasi ke ngemnotho ngeliphondvo babedubi ngifuna nje kubuyela si reinforce naye inkulumo yengwenyama la ingwenyama ithi asicaphele tindvo letingenda umnotho wakithi ke uthi ulimale futhi ungakhuli. From a broader perspective ngitiphe letinye tale tindvo kumbe lekungafuna ukuthi uhulumende atibuke. Sikhuluma ngalo ukuthi kwethulwa kwemaphakelo etimali kuyavama kumbe esikhathini lesinyenti ukuthi uyalandzelela naseParliament Public Accounts Committee sabakhulumisa ukuthi kunetimali letingakasebenzi kahle lapha nalapha lamaphakelo lesiwajabulelako namuhla ukuthi are allocated to enhance the standard of living and to grow the economy of this country.
Loku ngiyabonga John, lokunye lokuyinkinga kakhulu. I think lekufuna sikulungise kahle. Lokungathuthukisa umnotho usakhuluma ngale expenditure ukuthi kumbe indlela ukukwelekeka ngayo lomthelo nathi singamaswati sethenga ukuthi sifunze nje ukubhadala. Just be used to paying your taxes.
Voluntary compliance.
Voluntary, yes. And then sesibuya ke kulena ye government expenditure. Imali yakhiwa ngendlela yokuthi in an economy should circulate. I pay myself, I pay you, you pay him, you pay me. It works like that. So if should there be somewhere kube ne loophole ingasaphumi la le mali. So basically the link has been broken. That's what has happened in our economy. What has happened, I'll give just one illustration of this, the corruption, and there's the delay, the default in payment by government. Let's call it default. There are two ways to define a default. The default goes to but the default also delay the payment. So lapha sikhuluma ngale issue delay in payment. So that has made us to see ukuthi kwele ukuthi le cycle yale circulation of the money ingasabi nglephelele. So the expenditure lengasi kahle le resulta, because it's an issue of an egg and a chicken. Lokunye lokwenda le mali ukuthi bonakala ngase sekuyi corruption noma ngase yaphuma ukuthi the supplier will overcharge because uyobhadalwa nga 25 years later. So he's trying to cover the cost of that. The other thing is just a general corruption where the money is misused. Imali bekufanele iye kubogogo seyigcina seyadinlami seyibuya likhala. So that's something that actually removes the cycle. That's the wrong part in anything that we do. But the other thing is the expenditure. We have to have quality expenditure. When we're talking about quality expenditure, is expenditure that adds value to you, whatever you're doing, to our economy. It should add value to whatever we're doing. If we're spending on education, it should add value. But if we're spending on education and people decide not to work in this country, it's a
wasted investment.
It's a wasted investment. Although it contributes to the global economy, but the primary beneficiaries of the doctor we are losing on it. So those are some of the things that because like Dr. has said, it goes back to me, down to my goals. How am I willing to contribute to this country with what they have given me?
Yeah. Dr. Chongwa, I just want to zero in briefly on this same statement we have just seen, where as much as it says in the midterm overall growth is projected to be 2.6%. What are some of the principles that are being used when you project growth in an economy? And secondly, when we say midterm, what are we talking about?
Basically, we're talking about in the short run, in the first half of our entire economic period, what is it that we expect?
Yeah.
So that's basically midterm.
So in our case, our financial year starts in April, ends in April the following year.
Yes.
So when we say in the midterm, what exactly does this look like for us?
Basically, there are quarters in a year. Countries that differ from which quarters. So basically, in the first quarter, we are looking forward to seeing these indicators becoming realistic. The first quarter is a very good indication, because after that, then we'll be in a crisis, because the first quarter is giving us wrong impressions. So which means government must work extremely hard to prove in the first quarter that we are on the right track.
Kanzi ke maswahla mahle ngike ngayithenza ke indzaba ukuthi kungaba kuhle nalokuthi ke sesike sibuke nje ukuthi emaphakelo etimali eminyaka lophelile noma ke eminyaka wanga 2018 2019 uma wacathanisa lemaphakelo ke etimali eminyaka wanga 2019 2020 bekemeke kanjani lokho ekutafsita kubuka ke sithombene ukuthi kumbe kuye kube khona ukukhula kwemaphakelo etimali mawacathanisa eminyaka neminyaka lophelile njengana kuke lesikubonako ke ukuthi mathutane lokusikhombisa kona ke lamaphakelo ukuthi ngabe vele bekemeke kanjani sitawukhona ukuthi kube sibe nesithombe ama economists babedube they look at things and they project them and they create an outlook. I don't know if I'm correct when I say what we're about to see could possibly create an outlook or a projection for us to say kukhona lestakubona increases in terms of allocations and some of the portfolios.
Yes. My economists nagenda leyo focus, they base it kuma different detailed models laba usebenzisako to project whatever variable laba isebenzisako. So kugcina ke kuphumeleyo projection. But some of it comes down to the strategic assessment. This is the strategy that we are taking as a nation. I just want to talk about something nakuyavela kule speech isengwenyama. I think iyakhuluma growth. Kunenzaba ye revenue. Live lethu lisene inkinga yokurelya ku customs union. I think that is still a very, very important issue. Lesolo ikhulunywa cishe iminyaka leminingi. But now ngibuka siphinze siyabuyela khona kulowo mgodi lo, because now we seem to be comfortable again because of sayingenile customs union. Gani kayisiyo imali lesingathi la yakuyo for growth. I think ke minister kule nkulumo yakhe lafuna yisho ba projectile ukuthi how do we reduce our dependence on the customs union as a nation in case the customs union iyasuka maybe nasijwayele ukuthola 2 billion per quarter isuke ibuye ku 1.1 ngiyabekisa 1. How do we survive because things still have to be paid? So as a nation those are kind of the strategies leswagadile ukuthi bawabeke ukuthi sicabanga ukuthi to survive in terms of income as a nation independently, these are the things that we need to work on.
Of course. Sifuna ke kubuka maswahla amahle ukuthi unyaka wanga 2018 na 2019 bomeke kanjani mawuqhathanisa neminyaka wanga 2020 kuya ke ku 20 noma ku 2019 kuya ku 2020 kuyasisi wakhasona ke leso sithombe ingathi ke kumbe kuhle kungibalekela ngibathe ngiyakubona kuyavela kuhle kunyamalala. The term projection, Dr. Chongwa, I don't know if I can use a Eswatini word nakuwe babedop, when we say projection endani lama economists noma kumbe la hulumende uyabekisa yini noma kumbe kukhona ema principles la setshenziswako loku like in the case of the 2.6% growth in the midterm, you know, is this just an estimate based on how we feel or how we expect things? What exactly do we put together that determine that we are likely to see a 2.6% growth, maybe Dr. Chongo?
Yes. Just like what Mr. Dewey said, there are models that we use to project, and basically is on the principle of probability. And the probability, you do it based on the precedents of the past. So what you do is you look at the trends, what is it that is coming through and what is going out. Then from there you'll be able to project even 20 years from now. There are models that works. Actually it's just a computer, if I'm using simplest language.
Yeah.
So it is not guesswork.
Yeah.
To say no, now let's think of 2. No, 2 is too much. Let's come to 1. No.
It doesn't work like
it
that.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's mathematics at play,
Yeah.
and then the figures will always tell the truth.
Yeah. Ukhuluma kakhulu babedube ngenza ba ye revenue, which I think for me is what determines what the minister is going to allocate, you know. This is our resource envelope, you know. A lot of stakeholders have lamented the situation, like you are already saying, that we rely mostly on the SACCO receipts, and over and over again we've heard our head of state, the prime minister, the finance minister also lamenting the same situation, you know. But what is a likely solution to us not depending too much on the SACCO receipts? You know, we need to, when we talk about this, also bring solutions on the table. What are some of the measures we can take as a country to diversify our revenue sources?
Ngiyabonga John. It's a very, very critical thing lekufanele siyende. But kubuya ekuthenini live lethu liqale kukhicita. Ngakhuluma ngemanufacturing sector. Lokufanele kube ngiyo lekhulako. Lethina ikhula lokuhle awumangala ukuthi imanufacturing sector ngiyona icasha abantu labanengi. Nje general ngiyona icasha, it employs a lot of people. Once leyo sector leyo yafa in an economy, abaqasha abantu nalendlela yemisebenzi yakhula. Lesikubonile ka live ngethi la Eswatini ukuthi sibone I manufacturing sector lingcenye yaka construction ifa inciphile kakhulu. I think ngabo 20 something percent in the quarter, hayi le quarter ledlulile. Nembiko lokhishwe Central Bank bayasho siyehlile kakhulu I-construction sector kani ngiyona icasha incumbi yabantu. So lokusho ukuthi ke ngalelo sihlanga silolo lithikametekile kakhulu. So silive ke kufuna bese ke lalamanye ama sectors azame ke manje lokusebenta atokhicita akhiphe lena nas exporter more as a nation with the new inventions that we want to do and that we have tinvo lesikhicitako. It will help us ngokuthi sicale ke kuba ne positive. Once there's more export than import, so kuyaqala ukuthi live seliyakhula. So singatenda letinye tindlela letikhona lama measures labafakile ku budget speech last year. Yaqala nje kwaba ne tax levy ye fuel that has a way of trying to generate imali kokusibuye ekhulumende. Uphinze washo minister ukuthi utawukhuphula lamanye ama cost alamanye ama services government was offering, like the review maybe 10 or 20 years ago. That was one of the strategies labayibeka. The senior strategy labasibeka was to sell some of the government assets. Laba baqanisa raise about 400 million into government kuze tokhona ukuthi abe ne revenue. Those were more of short-term more especially some government assets, and those are short-term solutions,
interventions.
Yes, but what is important, lokuta uqhuba sikhathi lesithe ngiyambona na minister we trade uyazama ukuthi, I think there was a speech I watched on TV 2 days or not last night, the other day, where in the morning where he was talking about tinvo labatubekile to grow a small scale sector. I think they are trying to drive ukuthi asikhicite such that sitakhona ukuthengisa sikhona ukuthi kungene imali even. That's the way lengasi sustain. Angeke ku sustain ku raise imali through ama treasury bills, ngeke ku sustain kuboleka imali ehlobeni tenkosi. That has a negative impact because le mali esibolekile ehlobeni tenkosi saboleka lo 50 billion US dollars utasebenzela thina sisaphila, but bantu bakho John will have to pay back that money.
Yeah, maybe you will have to contribute later on, Dr. Chongwa, in terms of other revenue sources we can explore as a country. Asesibuke ke maswatla mahle lokuthi umnyaka wa 2018 na 2019 mawucathanisa na 2019-2020 wona ke bomeke kanjani imali leti khombisa ke uhulumende ukuthi uwabeke kanjani emaphakelo njengoba ke sibona ke litiko ke letamfundo ngilona ke lithola ke imali lengetulu kwa 3 billion. I think it was about 3.2 billion that government allocated to the Ministry of Education, as well as the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of ICT, and the Ministry of Tourism as well. This state of events, Dr. Chongwa and Mr. Dube, a lot of our resources allocation go to the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health. You know, when we talk about events of the past 10 years, you know, this was the state of affairs.
Yes.
Where if you talk about tourism, the allocation is almost like a quarter of what education gets, ICT, and so on and so forth. But now let's look at how 2019-2020 looks like. This is the state of affairs in terms of how things eventually fed up in 2019-2020. We always see a constant increase in education, in health, in agriculture, in energy and mining. When I reflect on the speech from the throne in 2019-2020, one of the priorities the Prime Minister, Ambrose Mandvulo Dlamini, and his cabinet wanted to explore was the energy and the mining sector, and for us also to strengthen digital platforms to ensure that we are an export-driven economy via these digital platforms. But also there is a huge potential, and His Majesty always speaks about how we can explore tourism, you know. Are we likely now, when we talk about a state of renewal in the next 10 years, and how we need to do things differently, are we likely to see a complete shift in terms of the allocations in this state of events in the year 2020, 2021? For instance, are we likely to see a huge allocation to mining so that at least government then can start exploring opportunities in the mining sector, strengthen the ICT sector so that at least we can explore opportunities around that industry? Are we likely to see a shift, new beginnings in some other areas like energy, ICT, or even agriculture itself, which I think is underutilized, yet we have said it has an opportunity to employ or to absorb a huge number of people in the country?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. If you look at the trends, previously the country has been much on the social security aspect, which is basically consumption spending.
Yeah.
Because let's take, for example, you push in money in education, you push in money in health. It's okay. We need a healthy economy. But at the end of the day, what is the multiplier effect? You find that the multiplier effect is a long term. Now, on the investment spending, if you look at the trends that we just looked at together, you discover that there is very little on investment spending. Hence, issues of ICT, for example, tourism, and others, agriculture. So look at agriculture, of which it must be almost second, if not the highest, you know. So we find that agriculture, because it is a stimulant of investment spending, and it has got a broader linkage in terms of supply chain. So the longer, the broader the supply chain, the more participatory and involving that particular sector is, like the agro-processing part and so on and so forth. And not only that, if you look at the statistics on the import and export, we import more of agriculture produce from South Africa, which is actually 90%. So now, if we import, which means we are spending. So our investment trends this year or going forward, if it can be a little bit shift towards the multiply effect on the investment spending, to be very, very productive.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chongwa. Lana ke bekunene sikhombisa nje ukuthi uhulumende uphakeleke kanjani imali eminyakeni wanga 2018 2019 mawucathanisa na 2019 2020. Nga 2020 noma nga 2018 2019 etikweni ngelento emfundo uhulumende wafaka imali engu 3.29 billion emalangeni. Kwathi ngeminyaka wanga 2019 2020 lokungulomnyaka lophelile wafaka imali engu 3.543 billion. Leyakhombisa ke ukuthi lamaphakelo akhuleleke ngalokho siphohlongo ekhulwini. Kanti ke ehlangothini lotempilo ngonyaka wanga 2018 2019 bekafake 1.923 billion. Wayenyusa uhulumende le mali yetiko letempilo almost significantly. Yanyuka ke yaba ngo20 noma ngo2.24 billion eminyakeni ke wetimali lophelile. Lokukhombisa ke ukuthi yenyuka ke ngalokulishumi nesithupha ekhulwini. Elitiko letekulima lekulitiko kumbe lesibukele ukuthi lingawuqinisa ke umnotho welive lakithi. Imali yakho ikhombiseke kwenyuka ngalokungemashumi amabili ekhulwini 20%. Energy and mining njengoba bese indicator Babedube. Last year we saw a dramatic increase, if I may say, almost 53% increase in the allocation of last year compared to the financial year 2018-2019. What does this indicate? If we may just zoom in on the energy and the mining sector, as well as tourism. I think ICT also realized a growth of 15% allocation in terms of increase from the last financial year.
Thank you, John. I think what is happening is the focus of, generally, for inflation purposes, that's the first basic point in terms of the increment. And then the other one is the change in the focus of whatever sector the government is prioritizing. On the energy sector, there's quite a lot, I think, that government is trying to push in terms of being sustainable, self-sustaining as a country in terms of power of energy. I'll give an example of the electricity. We're importing quite a large amount from South Africa. So the country, I know one of the objectives was to try to have a way that we're self-sustaining as an economy. We're able to generate, part of the electricity comes from within, such that even if we come to the end of the contract we have with Eskom in South Africa and the other trading partners, we can still survive. So I think part of it was trying to drive our nation to independency in the power supply in the energy sector. Then the other sectors on the ICT and the other one, I want to comment on the ICT. Some money was injected to ICT. ICT is quite interesting. It's not only computers, but what we've observed, even the television we are talking on, we are at now as we speak. ICT is part of ICT. I think if these departments are utilized to the fullest, lama budget especially lena yaga ICT, because surprisingly the television ibesihamba iwela na culture. The culture is the way we do things. So say let's have the issue yebantu ma television laba actor that increases employment. There's quite a lot that involved. So those sectors, if they can grow and are well-nurtured,
resourced as well.
Resourced, yes, well-nurtured. Kunengi lokungazuzeka kule live. Singayibuki IT ngathi dincingo nabo computer, but it is very broad. Uyati ukuthi IT izihambe ifaka ngisho umuntu wena makeup we salon nasibuka from the television perspective. So those are the sectors that I think need to be nurtured and focus we can grow.
Just a quick one, Dr. Chongwe. I had a short conversation with you yesterday, and you seem to demonstrate a very strong passion for how this country can move forward if we can diversify our economy. When I was looking at the allocations there, and you realize that the allocation we got in 2018-2019 compared to what we got in 2019-2020, the increase was just 1%. This to me tells us that there are certain sectors we have neglected, in favor of maybe other areas, But when we talk about diversifying this economy, and like you were saying, we've seen countries like your Tanzania, your Mauritius, they've benefited hugely from channeling resources in the tourism sector, But what is your model or your view of how we can diversify our economy? even in terms of the opportunities that are already available in the tourism sector, the mining and the likes?
Thank you. To answer you through one word, the model that we can use it is integration model. You see, this model that we are using right now, it is this model of saying my ministry or my sector is starving, which means it is autonomous. I mean, there's no integration.
Yeah, they operate in silos.
Yeah, exactly. Now that is very expensive to run an economy. But if you integrate, you make the whole economy like a supply chain system. This one feeds into this one. Let's take, for example, if you look at the trends that we just discussed, without agriculture, without food, with this climate change which is coming in, without food, without energy, the rates have gone up now on consumption on domestic level everywhere. So the cost of doing business just goes up and the money is going fast. Without these two sectors, I'm telling you the truth, we are wasting time and Jesus Christ will find us like this.
Siteke tindzaba temaphakelo kwetimali temnyaka wanga 2020 kuya ke ku 2021 indvuna yetikole temafa neLrickenback utawetfula ke kutseke mathutane lamaphakelo sihloleni maswatla mahle na ku YouTube ukuthi ke lenkulumo ke nikwati kuyibamba kahle nicaphucaphune kahle ikakhulu nyalo nje kushaya bo 10 emsebentini litiya uyakhona ke kuhlola ukuthi ungabe umsakazo wenta ini ngena ke ku www.swazitv uhlole ukuthi ngabe senda ini kuyo ke website yethu, and I will be giving you more other options of how you can navigate into this digital platform lapho khona ke sikhona ke lokusakata khona. I also want us to, when we come back from the King's Clip, the role of the academia. Last year when we attended the Eswatini Economic Conference at the Royal Swaziland Eswatini Convention Center, the emphasis was on how we can strengthen research skills to find opportunities, so that when we say there are opportunities, they are research informed. You know, what is the role of the academia in terms of making sure we diversify the opportunities, or even identify those opportunities? Maybe the economists will help me to sort of say, how do we bring in the academia into the mainstream of the economy, so that at least we find out exactly where the opportunities are and how we can optimize on those. Let us take more on what the King said when he opened Parliament.
It is vitally important for the kingdom to be self-sustained and financially stable. This necessitates that more revenue is generated in the country. It also requires appropriate revenue laws, prioritization of efficient and effective tax collection, adequate measures to control expenditure, and creation of revenue sources.
Bekunene kumqoka kakhulu ukuthi live likhona ukutimela ikakhulu ngasemnothweni, lokhu kudinga ukuthi imali licocwako tibe tinyenti eveni, kuphinde kudinga ukuthi kushaywe imithetho lephathelene nokucoca kwetimali, kubekwa embili kukhona nekwati ukucoca kwetimali letingenako ebhodweni lahulumende, timiso letiqinile tekwengamela nokuqinisekisa ukuthi timali tisebenziseka ngendlela nekuvula tindlela tekwakha imali.
We do acknowledge the growth of SACCO receipts and hope the momentum will continue. We encourage more participation of Emaswati towards developing initiatives that would support this revenue in order to complement the SACCO receipts.
Siyakubona futhi siyakwethabela kukhula kwekungena kwetimali takasakho. Sethemba ukuthi lokhu kutawuqhubeka. Sikhuthaza eMaswati ukuthi aqhubeke nokuthi imbandzakanya ekukhuliseni emathuba latawusekela lokucoca kwaletimali kuze kusite ekukhuliseni lesikhwama sakasakho.
Sisakata ke kuphakelo kwemaphakelo etimali eminyaka wanga 2019 kuya ke ku 2020 kutawondeka kutheke mathutane eParliament ingathi ke neminyakato sokucalile ke khona ke lena indase etindlini taseParliament lapho khona ke bafana bakithi etinsathele letfa ekhathi ke LinkedIn Gule nasibusiso Ngubane bayingcenye yekusithathela ke lokho lokwenteka khona batawusikhombisa njengoba ke sibona ke emalunga eParliament sekavele ke aqalile ahleti ke alungiselela ukuthi ke indvuna ingangena ke noma ngabe kunini kutawucala ke umsebenzi khona ke etindlini taseParliament njengoba ke sibona ke lilanga lelikhulu phela kuniketwana netimbali lapha iValentine's Day lokusho silamaphakelo etimali lonyaka siwa deliver with a spirit of love. As you can see, the roses being distributed in the House of Parliament today. I think this is a unique occasion. It's the first time I'm seeing such a gesture taking place in the House of Parliament, where each and everyone that is in the House is actually receiving a red rose. And I think the spirit of love is going to prevail in the House of Parliament today. The budget speech delivered on Valentine's Day, which is a day synonymous with love. I don't know if it's a coincidence, so some may say we are superstitious and so on, but it's quite a heartwarming gesture at the same time.
Yeah, basically, behind the Valentine's, the main emphasis is passion.
Passion.
Yeah, and of course, passion and love, they are, two sides of one coin.
Yeah.
To me, I can say that I think we can take advantage of why this has fallen on a day of passion. We must call this budget day as our day, not as a day for government to do its things.
Yeah.
But each and every citizen must be more than willing to support that which has been allocated to that particular sector.
Yeah. I should have known and have probably could have called or invited an expert on love issues to say what would be the role of love, in terms of strengthening or growing our economy as a country. We just want to say or to look closely at some of the sources of revenue that we have as a country. His Majesty the King was actually talking about diversifying or strengthening our revenue sources as a country. But maybe we will just look closely at some of these revenue sources and see if we have an opportunity to diversify this. For instance, at the present moment, we have a revenue source where we derive 19% of our income from personal income tax, and we get 34% from the SACCO receipts, and from value-added tax, we get 18%, and from corporate income tax, it's 8%, and donor funds, it's about 7 to 3%, and proposed revenue measures is about 5%. But I think, Babet Dube, this now gives us an opportunity to see if there are opportunities to even strengthen the one that are already existing. Let's talk about the issue of corporate tax, for instance. We are only deriving 8% of our revenue from corporate tax. What does this mean? Is this sufficient? Does this mean we've got a shallow corporate base in the country, which is why we only realize a revenue pool of 8% from this source?
Thank you, John. Ngicabanga ukuthi ngikona kukhona lokukushoko lokhu nje ngemnotho wethu ukuthi awusiwo lo kahle. I-corporate sector normally ngiyo le driver economy because it's private. So nangabe incipha njengoba sibona incane kangaka, which is quite very very narrow. Kusho ukuthi mancane ama corporates la khona ukuthi akhona ukuthi sustain such that they could be in a position to pay taxes, because from a corporate perspective you pay the taxes from your profits. So it basically means it's either money noma lawo la khona they haven't been in a position to make enough profits to pay us. So kukhona ke lokushoko ngemnotho wethu ukuthi kumbe awusiyo lo mekahle. I think that's why they are trying to drive the issue ukuthi asesikhulise le manufacturing sector. Once if it's there, itawukhula nale corporate tax, which will add to our tax revenue, to our revenue source.
Yeah, Dr. Chongwa, I'll give you an opportunity to help us to understand what the King was saying when he mentioned the issue of value addition in everything that we do, particularly in the agriculture sector. Or last year he was talking mainly about strengthening the agro-processing sector,
Yes,
and this year he brought it in a different context and said, let us consider value addition in all the things that we do. I don't know if we have commodities or products that we are not fully utilizing its entire value chain. For instance, the sugarcane industry. can we fully explore and realize some value addition where sugarcane is concerned, and maybe some others? We've got pulp, we've got this and that, but these products always come back as finished products in the country. What can we do to make sure that we derive more or entire value in this system?
Yeah, number one, we can talk about raw entrepreneurship, for example. There's a lot that we can do to add value to that. And above all, tourism. Tourism is a culture of which I think in sub-Saharan Africa, Eswatini is ranked number one. So, but there is very little, value chain on these particular sectors. So if we can become more innovative and more creative in terms of attracting tourism industry, then definitely even our FDIs will be channeled along those areas, so that at the end of the day, we'll be able to have a broader employment base. And then once we have a broader employment base, definitely the issues of revenue is going to improve, and indirectly the production part is also going to pull in the revenue part.
Yeah, you may also want to contribute in that regard. How do we make sure we derive full value on the areas where we are already productive? Sugarcane, your pineapple, your pulp, and so on and so forth. Do we have the sectors that we need to derive a full or added value on the current crops, production, and everything that we have?
Yes, sesibonile ukuthi sekukhona lokwendekako in the country that is adding in terms of value. We have seen ukuthi nje in the element here. I'll give a very simple example. Siyabona ukuthi laba package aluju, laba package something, they have added value in terms of, because a value adding is taking the raw material that we should be exporting maybe as a bucket for someone to package somewhere, but we now package it ourselves and send it out, maybe we write made in Swaziland. We have in Eswatini, I'm sorry. We have observed kokuthi sekukhona tinkampani leti khona lesekuqalile kwenta kanjalo. We know some of our companies saqalile ukukhipha small vegetables apackagiwe for sale, which is we've added the value on whatever the commodity, instead of saying selling likasi la banana lelinje, but package lo banana hambe so ne brand yakho, that adds value. So the adding of the value includes leto tinto leto lokufuna sitifundza singamaswati, singahambisi nje maybe ngiyabekisa besiqhina besende mahiya sesiwahambisa angenayo i-branding. Those kind of things we should add and minimize exportation of raw material without adding value in whatever we do. So ngiyakholelwa ukuthi singamaswati sitawukhona ukuthi some of the raw materials siwathathe thina lesinawo singawa export and we use them for our own purposes.
Yeah. I don't know, Dr. Chongwa and Nabababetu, but when I look at the sources of revenue that we already have, we've been talking about this, and all stakeholders generally have been talking about our reliance on SACCO, which when we look at it closely, it shows that we derive 34% of our revenue from SACCO. And the next biggest source of revenue is personal income tax, and the next bigger one is value added tax. I think this to me says we have a constrained source of revenue, because even the other ones that we have is like your 5%, 6%, and so on and so forth, and these ones are already overloaded, or overburdened, if I may say, In the 2020-2021 budget speech, what are we likely to see the minister implementing? Because even here on our proposed revenue measures, they only account for 5%, which won't change the situation that much in terms of the other constrained areas. What do we need to do to make sure that at least we have a sector that also may contribute maybe like your 12 to 15% in terms of revenue?
Words: efficiency and multiplication effect. Once we have an economic niche, how efficient is that niche? And number two, what is the multiplier effect of that particular niche? Let's take, for example, we've got poor revenue correction systems in the country. Okay, you want to go and pay your tax, you find a long queue, they close early. That it's into efficiency. So people would want to pay, but the system itself, the structure, the structure itself can be a barrier. So let us begin by addressing the barriers. What barriers are hindering the capitalization and multiplication of our current revenue structures? So this was going to save us from investing more money in other avenues that we will be hoping it will give us back. So let us work on the efficiency first. After we have circulated the income generation levels or platforms which are highly efficient, then we are going to say, what is plan B now? Secondly, 34 reliance on SACCO, it is a time bomb.
The next bill is orders of the day, accounting bill. The appropriation bill 2020, bill number 1, 2020, first reading.
On SACCO, 34%. So we have to find means of, one, to improve efficiency, two, bring up the multiply effect on the existing structures. The number 4, invest in what we call research and development strategies.
Sekuvele ke kuqalile ke eParliament amaswahla amahle indvuna ilitiko letemafa neLrickenback nawo ongemalunga eParliament lafa ekhathi nathi indvuna tembuso sebavele ke belungele ke kuthula ke wona ke emaphakelo ke etimali eminyakeni lophelile indvuna neLrickenback bekabethula ke kwekucala lamaphakelo bekunene njengoba ke sade ukuthi bekungumnyaka wayo kwekucala ke iCabinet lokufa ekhathi yona ke indvuna neLrickenback lebeka ngase waba indvuna yahulumende bekangase waba indvuna ilitiko ke letemafa. He delivered a 40-page budget speech last year, and what really gave me hope was to see him as a man who also relies on God the Almighty, where in his second paragraph in his speech, and he says His Majesty the King, and for the Lord's grace and mercy as we navigate this country's challenges. Lokusho ukuthi indvuna ithi idenda letibalo ibe iguce phasi bekeke litfolo. Sethemba ukuthi nalonyaka kunetinto ke lesitawudibona eminyakeni wanga 2018 2019 ngonyama yacela ukuthi le budget bekunene aseyiyendiwe ibuke ukuthi kunani ekhukhwini noma ke kunani esikhwameni naku lesikubita ngesilumbi ukuthi it's a fully financed budget. Is this also going to be a fully financed budget? I'm also interested in seeing if this year's deficit is going to be reduced compared to the deficit we realized last year, which in itself was also a reduced deficit compared to the 2017-2018 budget.
To read a scripture from Psalm 1 from verse 1 to 3. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on this law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt gratitude to their majesties for the confidence and trust that they placed in me as a custodian of this key portfolio in government. In particular, I'd like to thank His Majesty for being the unifying force in our nation and for giving us the mandate and direction as articulated in the speech from the throne. He has set out an ambitious agenda for us as a nation, an agenda that highlights our strengths and is forward-looking. His Majesty reminded us that time is of the essence in our socio-economic transformation, and that above all else, we must keep moving forward. Echoing His Majesty's speech that there's no time to lose. The government and the economy cannot live beyond its means year after year. In the previous budget cycle, Cabinet outlined a strategy to resuscitate the economy. This led to the launch of the Eswatini Strategic Roadmap 2019 to 2022, which aims to establish a policy framework that will ensure sustainable economic development, financial stability and growth, ultimately improving the quality of life of the people of Eswatini. This strategy necessitates adjustments in the short to medium term to ensure long-term sustainability. Mr. Speaker, government is committed to fiscal consolidation by finding ways and means to improve revenue inflows while trying to contain expenditure. However, fiscal adjustment alone cannot suffice. Essential structural reforms in economic policy are integral to the adjustment process. The focus on these reforms is on economic growth and stability. We must enable all sectors of our economy to attain a path of high and sustained inclusive growth. Even though the focus of this year's budget continues to be on building a resilient economy through fiscal consolidation, we are starting to see positive signs of growth, reflecting a promise of green shoots. Government has introduced measures to rationalize expenditures and make unavoidable sacrifices to ensure the long-term growth and fiscal sustainability. We are rising to this challenge and nurturing the seeds of progress while ensuring that preconditions of positive results are created. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step towards a road of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. Likewise, for the government, it has not been easy. Wages and salaries have been stagnated, budgets and overall spending has decelerated. Mr. Speaker, government continues to face cash flow challenges, causing us not to meet our financial obligations on time. This has resulted in the accumulation of significant arrears, which has placed a burden on suppliers of goods and services. This time last year, we had accumulated an arrears stock of 4.2 billion emalangeni. This excluded most of our arrears and capital projects and what has been referred to as invoices and draws. We made it a priority to settle these outstanding payments, and late last year, suppliers and service providers were called upon to resubmit the invoices and supporting documentation for verification. The internal audit team and Auditor General's Office are now conducting a verification exercise of these invoices so that the payment process can proceed. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to inform this House that our efforts are showing signs of success, as the total amount owed now stands at 2.2 billion emalangeni. This includes the old arrears, it includes the invoice and the draws, and includes the outstanding capital payments. We acknowledge that while dealing with existing arrears is part of the problem, our efforts will be in vain unless we ensure that this does not happen in the future. To curtail and discourage any spending happening outside of the budget and to improve overall budget execution, government has instituted a new reporting structure whereby each ministry reports on execution to the Planning and Budgeting Committee once every 2 months. I commend my fellow cabinet ministers and their teams for the efforts that have gone into this process and the great improvements that it is showing in this year's budget spend. While Eswatini is in a year of improved SACA receipts, we are committed to stay firm on the demanding course of fiscal adjustment we have set for ourselves. We will continue intensifying our efforts to eliminate our structural inefficiencies. We are cognizant of how cyclical buffers in SACA receipts create an illusion that leads to increases in expenditure. We are committed to using this temporary larger fiscal headroom to cushion our reserves and meet our payment obligations. Mr. Speaker, this budget is designed to improve the delivery of services and distribution of resources to all citizens, in particular the vulnerable groups. Mr. Speaker, His Majesty's government is committed to expanding the size and scope of the private sector in Eswatini. The Eswatini Strategic Roadmap and the National Development Plan speak volumes to our ambitions in this area. As His Majesty highlighted in his speech from the throne, government has declared 2020 as a year of the micro, small and medium enterprises, which I'll refer to as MSMEs, and will develop this sector focusing on access to finance and markets, empowerment of citizens and provision of incentives for SMMEs. The country needs to leverage on MSMEs the potential to build an economy that works for everyone. And it's essential that we create new jobs, protect and grow existing businesses, and attract foreign direct investment. We must continue to focus on the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in order to achieve His Majesty's Vision 2022. Mr. Speaker, may I now present to the House the global and domestic economic developments. Mr. Speaker, according to the World Economic Outlook, global economic activity is on a downward trend. The IMF has revised downwards the global growth in 2019 to 2.9%, a record low since the global financial crisis in 2008. This can be attributed to increasing trade tensions, particularly between the world's two largest economies, China and the USA, and larger uncertainty surrounding trade and geopolitics. Macroeconomic strain in several emerging markets and developing economies, in addition to structural factors such as low productivity growth and aging populations in advanced economies, are also contributing to low economic activity. In 2020, according to the IMF, the global growth is expected to improve slightly to 3.3%. In the sub-Saharan African region, growth has been revised downwards to 3.3% in 2019 and 3.5% in 2020. The sluggish growth is largely attributed to the region's two largest economies, Nigeria and South Africa, and the broader group of resource-intensive economies. Further risk to growth for most sub-Saharan African economies include climate shocks such as severe droughts and flooding. Dwindling growth in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa can weaken potential benefits Eswatini could yield from its continental neighbors. Despite a moderate rebound in the second quarter, growth is expected to be subdued in the Southern African region and the Republic of South Africa in particular in 2019. This follows a negative first quarter, which reflected the larger than anticipated impact of labor strikes and energy supply issues in the mining sectors, coupled with weak agricultural production. South Africa is Eswatini's major trading partner, and any developments in South Africa are likely to have an impact in Eswatini. On the domestic front, the latest figures indicate that economic activity was fairly resilient in 2019 and increased by an estimated 1.4%, in spite of the continued fiscal challenges and the weakening global demand. The positive growth during 2019 greatly benefited from improved regional demand for the country's major exports in key markets, including the Republic of South Africa. Manufacturing activity rebounded in 2019 following improved developments, in particular in South Africa, the USA, and the European markets. This resulted in the increased demand of the country's major exports, such as food and processing and manufacture of beverages and textile products. Other positive contributors to growth include the service sector, especially in the ICT subsector, which continues to benefit from the increasing innovation in this sector. In the primary sector, animal production improved, boosted by continued restocking of the sectors as it continues to recover from the 2015-2016 drought effects. Despite the improvement in animal production growth, though, the primary sector weakened during the period. Under the secondary sector, construction-related activities contributed negatively to growth due to the effects pertaining to fiscal challenges, which resulted in some projects being delayed, deferred, or not commencing at all. The service sector contracted during the period and contributed negatively to growth. This was mainly due to reduced activity in public administration and in the wholesale and retail subsector, owing to fiscal challenges which were linked to curtailed domestic demand. Mr. Speaker, a volatile outlook is anticipated for the medium term, with a positive outlook for 2020 as growth is expected to reach 2.6%, according to the World Bank. The growth in 2020 is backed by an anticipated relief of the government's fiscal position. The relief is linked to the clearing of arrears coupled with the rebound in government spending, and thereby stimulating domestic demand and promoting growth in sectors such as wholesale and retail, as well as tourism. In the medium term, economic growth will average 1.5%, anticipating continued fiscal pressures. This will intensify the need for fiscal consolidation. Full implementation of the strategic roadmap and the National Development Plan, which are geared towards sustainable and inclusive economic growth, remains key to achieving economic recovery in the medium term. Risks to the economic outlook, however, remain, and these include climate change issues such as recurring erratic weather patterns affecting agriculture and agro-processing. Further, the increase in trade tensions in major economies, reducing external demand, poses a risk to the domestic growth. Headline consumer inflation has been on the downward trajectory for the past 2 years. The downward trend is a result of normalizing food prices and declining housing and utility prices, owing to improved cash crop production in the agricultural sector and the freeze in the utility prices respectively. The average inflation for 2019 was recorded as 2.6% and is projected to remain below the upper CMA bound of 6% in 2020-2021 and over the medium term. Mr. Speaker, an analysis of the country's trade with the rest of the world results that in 2019 the country recorded an improved 4.6 billion emalangeni current account surplus, rising from the 1.3 billion surplus the previous year. The significant rise in the surplus equates to 6.9% of the country's GDP. The positive trade balance, amounting to 3.9 billion emalangeni in 2019, is explained by a 16.2% rise in export receipts, largely dominated by the country's export of soft drink concentrates, followed by sugar exports. On average, 69% of the country's exports are destined to the South African market. Kenya, Nigeria, and Mozambique have remained above the 1% market share, showing an increased trend in our exports going to African countries. Also, partly contributing to the significant rise in export receipts is the weak lilangeni against major global currencies, which benefited exporting companies. In the last 5 years, total imports from the South African markets have been in the 70 to 73% market share range. South Africa remains the main source of service imports for the country. However, net payments for these services declined by 22% to 1.9 billion in 2019 when recorded with the previous year. Mr. Speaker, as of December 2019, the monetary policy stance was kept accommodative, with the discount rate decreasing by 0.25 percentage points from 6.75% to 6.5%. In line with the accommodative monetary policy stance, total credit extended to households and businesses was calculated at 13.5 billion in December 2019. This is an increase of 8% compared to December 2018, where 12.4 billion emalangeni was extended as credit. The increase has mainly been driven by credit extension to households, which grew by 12%, while credit extended to businesses remained relatively stagnant. Mr. Speaker, one of the major responsibilities of government is to provide a sound financial regulatory framework for the country in order to create an environment which promotes private sector development. Government will, in this financial year, undertake a holistic financial sector reform to ensure financial stability and integrity. As at March 2019, the Savings and Credit Cooperative Society assets grew to 1.7 billion emalangeni from 0.85 billion emalangeni when the financial regulations came into effect. This is an 85% increase in the assets of this sector. Mr. Speaker, other developments within the financial sector include the automation of the Eswatini Stock Exchange, which has been completed to facilitate the participation of the ordinary Eswatini to buy and sell company shares and debt instruments using their electronic devices. This is a major milestone in the progress towards financial inclusion. This move will facilitate electronic trading, which should encourage more listings as well as acting trading exchange. The Eswatini Stock Exchange also incorporates a platform that enables micro, small and medium enterprises to participate in the stock exchange. We expect Eswatini businesses to benefit from accessing available financial resources to be able to expand their businesses through the stock exchange. Mr. Speaker, the central bank currently assesses the financial sector in order to ensure that it's stable. It is noted, however, that pockets of vulnerabilities do exist. These risks largely emanate from the low interest rate environment prevailing both domestically and internationally. The low interest rate has the potential of boosting economic productivity, but could, on the other hand, incentivize risk-taking in the search for yields from investors. The Central Bank of Eswatini continued to monitor the banking sector in light of a volatile global environment and has instituted mitigation actions. Consequently, the banking system's resilience has improved over the year. This was largely due to enhanced capital quality and increased coverage of risk for capital market activities introduced by the migration to the Basel II and IFRS 9 rules. Risks from the non-banking financial sector remains elevated despite notable growth in the sector's assets over the year. The risks originate from the volatility of financial markets over the year. Concentration risks remain high in the pension and retirement fund subsector. For this reason, government together with the central bank have drafted a financial stabilities bill. The bill aims to be an overarching guide to macroprudential surveillance, while the ultimate goal of macroprudential surveillance is risk mitigation planning for potential crises, and how to manage risk is also a significant pillar of guarding financial stability. In this regard, the central bank's work of formulating a crisis binder is ongoing and is further exploring options of establishing a deposit protection scheme. The scheme is an integral part of the crisis preparedness and crisis management and resolution framework that's currently under development. This framework will bring the country in line with international best practices on macroprudential surveillance in light of dynamic global risk parameters, to which the Kingdom of Eswatini is not exempt. Mr. Speaker, the Basel II implementation project has started. The aim of this regulatory enhancement is to ensure that consumers are protected and banks remain resilient to shocks. It is anticipated that all the pillars bylaws will be finalized in the financial year 2020-2021. The Central Bank of Eswatini continues to review secondary legislation for laws under its purview in trying to be responsive to changes that prevail in the banking landscape. Mr. Speaker, the Eswatini Financial Intelligence Unit has continued to play an important role in the anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism efforts, both from a policy and technical perspective, through its distribution of information to law enforcement agencies. Mr. Speaker, to ensure the integrity of the financial system, the central bank has reviewed and deployed its anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism risk-based supervisory framework. The aim is to ensure that the financial system is not used to launder illicit funds to finance terrorism, and if it so happens, such practices is quickly monitored and perpetrators are detected and deterred from such conduct. In addition, government passed legislation which provides a mechanism for civil forfeiture of the proceeds of crime. This is a process that runs parallel to the criminal prosecution and seeks to separate offenders from the ill-gotten gains. Mr. Speaker, to ensure prudent administration of exchange control, the central bank phased in a risk-based approach, resulting in the adoption of a financial surveillance function. Stakeholder engagements with the authorized dealers increased to ensure the ease of implementing the surveillance function. The central bank will be revising the simple guide of exchange controls to further enhance the understanding of the foreign exchange system by the public. Mr. Speaker, there's been a steady increase in reserves from the 1.8 months of import cover recorded in March 2019. Gross official reserves stood at 6.6 billion in January 2020, equivalent to 2.8 months of import cover. This is still not where we want to be, but the reserves are trending in the right direction towards the 3-month benchmark. Mr. Speaker, in 2019-2020, government revenue and grants are projected to amount to 17.6 billion emalangeni, equivalent to 25% of GDP. This was recorded against an initial estimate of 18.8 billion emalangeni, and this shortfall is largely attributed to the late implementation of revenue measures in the Finance Act of 2019 and the non-passage of other anticipated revenue measures. However, at 17.6 billion emalangeni, the projected revenue and grants for 2019-2020 is still higher than the 2018-2019 outturn of 15.7 billion emalangeni, which is approximately 24% of the 2018-2019 GDP. The higher revenue recorded in 2019-2020 reflects the improvements in SACA receipts and the collection of other tax revenues. SACA receipts increased from 5.8 billion to 6.3 billion and contributed about 36% of the total revenue, which is equivalent to about 9% of our GDP. Mr. Speaker, total government expenditure for the year 2019-2020 was budgeted at 21.8 billion. This indicates a 32% of GDP, which is about 3% higher than the outturns of 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, the deficit for the financial year 2019-2020 was estimated at 4.4% of GDP, which is lower than the 6.1% of GDP for previous financial years. This reflects a decrease from 3.6 billion emalangeni to 3 billion emalangeni. Whilst we have been able to fund part of this through local borrowing, a major proportion of the funding gap will not need any mobilization of additional finances because of reduced spending resulting from control measures applied by government matching expenditure to available cash. Mr. Speaker, at the end of December 2019, total debt stock stood at 19.2 billion emalangeni, equivalent to 28.12% of GDP, of which external debt is 7.1 billion emalangeni, equivalent to 10.38% of GDP, and domestic debt at 12.1 billion emalangeni, equivalent to 17.74% of GDP. In the 2019-2020 financial year, government signed loan agreements with different external financiers for the financing of infrastructure projects, including the Manzini Water Supply and Sanitation Project, the Manzini Golf Course Interchange Project, and the International Convention Center Project. Government continued to raise funds from the domestic market for the financing of capital investments and to develop the financial market. Mr. Speaker, it's important that government manages public debt prudently in order to ensure that it's within the stipulated threshold of 35% of GDP. Therefore, we will continue to exercise restraint when contracting any debt and further adopt more effective fiscal management principles and practices. In this regard, government will be getting technical assistance from the World Bank to develop a medium-term strategy which will assist in evaluating the cost, the risk, the trade-off associated with alternative financing strategies over the medium term. Mr. Speaker, cash flow management has continued to be a pressing issue for government. Low performance in the domestic capital market coupled with unfinanced expenditure has led to severe cash flow constraints having a negative impact on the overall economy, including crowding out the private sector activities. Arrears owed by government have accumulated over several years, indicating a pattern of unsustainable public expenditure. The government recognizes the severity of the situation and has made it a top priority to tackle the obstacles of economic recovery manifesting in the cash flow challenges. An arrears clearance strategy has been prepared to address the delayed payment to suppliers of goods and services, and a special committee has been established to implement the strategy. In addition to this, I'm pleased to announce that we have made a plan to clear the arrears. Mr. Speaker, in 2020-2021 fiscal consolidation continues to be our primary short-term goal. The overall objective is to bring government finances back on a sustainable path and prevent further accumulation of arrears, which hampers the performance of the economy at large. Fiscal consolidation will enable us to create the fiscal space through proper expenditure prioritization, budget allocation efficiency, and wider revenue mobilization. The budget I present to this Honourable House reflects the ongoing process of fiscal consolidation. We have managed to reduce the budget deficit as planned in order to contain it to financeable levels. We will continue to explore equitable measures that will improve the overall balance. Mr. Speaker, the budget for 2020-2021 displays an increase in recurrent expenditure by 8.4%. This has reduced the deficit to 3.6% of GDP compared to 4.4% of GDP in 2019-2020. Consolidation has proved to be a very challenging process considering the needs for government operations and service delivery as presented by line ministries in their budget submissions. I believe that the work undertaken to come up with this budget is a step in the right direction towards a low fiscal deficit. On revenue mobilization, the expectation is that growth in our domestic revenue base shall continue. Ongoing strategies for improvements in the collection of value-added tax, company tax, fuel tax, and personal income tax will reduce some of the revenue collection challenges we have faced in the past. Mr. Speaker, the five most recent IMF and World Bank country reports caution that Eswatini's largest budgetary outlier on the expenditure side, and also the single largest contributor to our fiscal deficit, is the size of our wage bill. We simply cannot afford to ignore this problem. Since the implementation of the freeze on employment, the number of civil servants has been reduced by a little over 1,000. As much of these policies and trends need to continue, we must also ensure that the quality and effectiveness of service delivery is not affected. Mr. Speaker, an unfortunate consequence of the cash flow challenge, a contribution of many factors, is that it has resulted in government not being able to grant a cost of living adjustment for the past 3 years. I'd like to thank the public service associations and its members for being tolerant and understanding in these difficult times that we are trying to overcome. We have continued to provide and pay for notching that has taken place every year. However, this has only been a benefit for some civil servants. This notching has increased the national wage bill with an average of 1.5% annually. This year, we have budgeted 113 million emalangeni for notching and 227 million for a cost of living adjustment. Mr. Speaker, government continues to prioritize the agriculture sector for investment in order to spur economic growth and overall acceleration of national development. The projects and programs attracting government budget in this sector are aimed at addressing food insecurity and rural poverty. A special thanks is directed to our cooperating partners for their continuous support to the country's agriculture sector. During the planting season 2018-2019, the country received good rains which had a positive impact on crop production. As a result, 96,773 metric tons of maize was harvested. This increase in production is also attributed to the Food Security Program, which provided subsidized farm inputs. Under this budget, government will continue to support the input subsidy program, with a budget allocation of 40 million emalangeni. It is envisaged that maize production and productivity will be improved as the country receives a grant of 34 million emalangeni from the Japanese government for procurement of agriculture machinery and equipment. This will help improve access to farming equipment by small-scale farmers and will significantly support maize production. The agricultural sector has received a lot of assistance from development partners to build its resilience and improve production. Several measures are being implemented in response to climate change, and these initiatives are ongoing to enhance production. A number of coordinated programs include the High Value Crop and Horticulture Project, the Fruit Tree Project, the Smallholder Market-led Project, that have started to generate significant input for farmers. The farmers have been supported to diversify their production from the traditional sugarcane and maize production to horticulture and small stock production. This has seen a marked increase, especially in local vegetable production. A total of 3,627 metric tons was purchased by retailers from local farmers, with an economic value of about 40.9 million emalangeni over the past 6 months. Investments have been made to improve the marketing of such commodities through the construction of collection points and cold storage facilities in strategic locations around the country. Mr. Speaker, government has allocated funding to finance the implementation of projects relating to water harvesting and irrigation development. A total amount of 745.1 million emalangeni has been allocated in this budget to finance the Lower Usutu Smallholder Irrigation Project, Phase 2, where a further 6,000 hectares of land is earmarked for irrigation development. The construction of the main canal conveyance system to deliver water to the Matata area is over 80% complete. The goal of this project is mainly to improve the standard of living of the population in the project area through an environmentally sustainable process. Under this budget, a total of 1.6 billion emalangeni will be provided to the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure adequate service delivery for crop and livestock services, agricultural research, water harvesting, and irrigation development and commercialization of the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, government continues to implement a number of water and sanitation projects aimed at promoting economic and social development. To date, the national potable water coverage stands at 69%. Government will also be implementing a water supply and sanitation project in the Nhlangano Sipambanweni area in the Shiselweni region, funded by the World Bank, amounting to $45 million. This project seeks to provide potable water for domestic consumption, institutional and commercial usage, as well as improve sanitation coverage and the long-term management of water resources. Mr. Speaker, government continues to create an enabling environment for investment in the energy sector. The Eswatini Energy Regulator Authority has launched a competitive bidding process, procurement process for a 40 megawatt solar PV power plant and has already identified the qualified bidders. Civil works for the construction of the EEC's 10 megawatt solar farm in Lavomisa PV plant has also commenced, and the plant is expected to run by June 2020. The 13 megawatt Lower Makuduza hydro power plant is expected to be completed by December 2021. Government, in partnership with key stakeholders, continues to explore the viability of establishing more power plants locally, from coal, wind, hydro, biomass, as well as natural gas. While the country is strengthening its local generation, significant progress has been made with electricity access through the Rural Electrification Program, which continues to uplift the lives of many in Eswatini. To date, the national electrification rate stands at 80%. Government has also worked on the preparatory phase for the construction of the Strategic Oil Reserve Facility in pursuit of energy security in the petroleum sector. This project is now at resource mobilization stage. Mr. Speaker, the hardship and suffering of disadvantaged segments of our society has not passed unnoticed. To support the citizens affected by poverty, government has increased the allocation to Bokoko Nabomkulu from 400 emalangeni to 500 emalangeni per month. The old age home based at Mankayan is also expected to be completed in 2020-2021 financial year. In addition, the monthly grant for the disabled has been increased from 180 emalangeni to 280 emalangeni per month with effect from January 2020. We hope that the revised grant allocations will provide some relief to our most vulnerable, while fully acknowledging that this is only a first step towards the creation of a benefiting social security net. In creating a conducive environment, the DPM's office will finalize the development and regulations of the Children's Protection Welfare Act, the Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Act, and the Persons with Disability Act. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to invest in our most important resource, that is, our people. In an effort to enhance human capital development, especially on investing in children, government has continued to safeguard budget allocations for the social sector. Mr. Speaker, the budget allocation for education is above the international benchmark of 15% of total government expenditure. An international study has shown that Eswatini is amongst the top 10 investors in education in the world relative to our GDP per capita. The year 2020-2021 marks 10 years since the country introduced free primary education program in all public primary schools. In the 2020-2021 fiscal year, government will continue to implement and sustain the program with more focus on improving the quality of education and learning outcomes. In 2019-2020, government introduced and successfully implemented a competency-based curriculum in grade 1, which is now expected to be rolled out grade by grade annually. This curriculum has been developed to reflect the aspirations of Eswatini, national development priorities, and the needs of society. The new curriculum places strong emphasis on the development of essential competencies, skills, values, and attitudes in order to prepare learners to become effective contributors to the economy and social development, as well as becoming global citizens who can compete internationally. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to support the Grade 0 program currently offered in 80 public primary schools. Following the assessment of the Grade 0 program, government's focus will be on improving the regulation and efforts to early childhood care and development education. The country continues to face challenges with regard to limited access to secondary education. Currently, the enrollment rate at secondary level stands at 46.3%. In an effort to address this challenge, government is engaged in a dialogue with the World Bank to receive support in addressing issues of internal inefficiencies in the education system, resulting in high dropout and repetition rates. With English no longer being a compulsory passing subject, the number of repeaters and dropouts is expected to decline. A repetition strategy has been developed aiming to reduce the repetition rate while preserving the quality of education in the country. Mr. Speaker, government's in the process of completing 4 fully fledged inclusive secondary schools, 1 in each region, with support from developing partners. Construction of the 4 schools is expected to be completed during the school calendar year 2020. In an effort to address teacher management issues, government's in the process of introducing a computerized teacher file management system to improve the efficiency of the teacher management functions in the Ministry of Education and Training. The introduction of this system demonstrates government's commitment towards adopting a culture of excellence in service delivery. Mr. Speaker, an amount of 3.5 billion emelangeni is allocated to the education sector, corresponding to 15.3% of the total budget. This budget will facilitate the provision of equitable, quality, and relevant education opportunities for all people in Eswatini. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to strive for universal healthcare coverage. Programs and activities towards the fight against HIV/AIDS are being successfully implemented and have greatly assisted us to reduce the HIV incidence from 2.9% in 2011 to 1.4% in 2019. This means that fewer people are getting infected by HIV. This success has been achieved due to government and partners' investments in these programs. We'd like to give special thanks to PEPFAR, the Global Fund, the Republic of China and Taiwan, and the UN agencies for their support. This commitment and support needs to be sustained, and this requires an expansion of the breadth of services available at clinical level to ensure better treatment outcomes. In this budget, government has provided 274 million emelangeni for ARVs. Mr. Speaker, I wish to express appreciation to It is forward-looking and embraces the challenges and opportunities of a globally interconnected labour market. The overarching objective is to manage labour migration so that it protects workers, develops the country's economy, strengthens skills and developments, and benefits society at large. Government has finalised a national social security policy and implementation plan, which will establish the Workers' Compensation Insurance Fund, the Eswatini National Pension Fund, and the National Health Insurance Fund. Mr. Speaker, the National Human Resource Development Policy and Implementation Strategy is set to be operationalised by the end of the current financial year. The policy is designed to facilitate the development of relevant skills and competencies to meet current and future labour market needs for an increased labour market participation and thereby spurring economic growth. It will address issues of lifetime learning, culture of productivity, work-based learning and skills mismatched. Government has introduced a new online study loan application system in line with the e-government strategy. The use of the system by applicants commenced in February 2019. Government has further introduced a new 30 days interval study loan disbursement system that has been effective from September 2019. Mr. Speaker, in the coming financial year, Government will undertake a comprehensive review of the study loan management system and propose a new institutional arrangement and a sustainable public-private partnership-based financing model. Mr. Speaker, improving the quality of life and economic well-being of our people remains a priority for this government. I'm pleased to report that the allocation for the Regional Development Fund has increased from 110 million emalangeni to 177 million. This is to ensure that there's equitable development in the different Tinkundla. I thought I was going to get a hand clap there, but Mr. Speaker, the private sector is the engine for economic growth and job creation. Government's policy aims to end the uncertainty that has undermined confidence and constrained the private sector investments. Government has produced a draft master plan earmarked to push the implementation of the development agenda. This plan contains projects to be discussed with development partners in the planned donor conference as part of the resource mobilization drive. Mr. Speaker, 85% of Eswatini now have access to formal financial services. Financial inclusion is higher amongst women at 87% compared to men at 83%, and higher amongst adults residing in urban areas, which is 90%, compared to rural areas, 83%. Government will, in the financial year 2020-2021, develop and finalize the financial inclusion policy as well as legislation to improve access to development finance. The National Financial Education Strategy will also be concluded to provide a framework and roadmap to educate Eswatini financially. Mr. Speaker, Eswatini's national and cultural heritage are the main tourism attractions. Utilizing our national heritage endowment by realizing its tourism potential will provide Eswatini with significant benefits. Notwithstanding its current level of development, the tourism industry has made impressive progress. The country has been rated as the 5th best world destination to visit in 2020 by Lonely Planet, which is one of the leading global travel agencies. Eswatini is now known is now a known international tourist destination of choice, which strongly justifies development in tourism potential for the benefits it will provide to Eswatini. Mr. Speaker, government will review the tourism bill, which intends to create an enabling environment for the tourism sector to thrive. Mr. Speaker, the country endeavours to safeguard the environment, conserve wildlife and culture, ensure sustainable forest management, reduce meteorological hazards, and build a climate-resilient country. Eswatini stands to experience environmental degradation through water and air pollution, coupled with the indiscriminate cutting of trees and widespread littering. In addition, the country continues to be prone to extreme weather conditions. This results in an increase in natural disasters, which adversely affect socio-economic activities in the country. It is therefore becoming critical to strengthen the early warning systems and collaboration between the Meteorological Service and all affected sectors. The government of Eswatini launched a Clean Eswatini campaign named Kota Tibi. The campaign is being rolled out in the form of monthly nationwide cleanup campaigns undertaken every last Saturday of the month. Government's in the process of launching a tree planting campaign, which aims to create awareness and promote good environmental management practices. Mr. Speaker, the deteriorating performance and efficiency of the public enterprises is an increasing concern to government. Most of these entities are fully dependent on government funding, and only a few are self-sustaining. Some of these entities have continued to fall behind in PAYE and VAT payments, amounting to over 1 billion emalangeni. Therefore, government will conduct a study to streamline and enhance performance as well as sustainability of these entities. This is aimed at reducing the number of enterprises by merging those with similar mandates. In the medium term, government plans to develop policy guidelines for the establishment and management of public enterprises. Mr. Speaker, business connectivity and government service accessibility has been improved through the rehabilitation of some of the obsolete central infrastructure and equipment. This includes replacement of the government core network equipment and security. In 2020-21 financial year, government will, with the assistance of development partners, further digitize its service as well as extend networks to the Tinkundla service centers and health facilities. Government will continue with implementation of projects at the Royal Science and Technology Park, which includes completing the construction of the one-stop shop service center, currently at 83% completion. The service center will give assistance to the administration and implementation of the Special Economic Zone program and house a temporary quality testing and assurance lab, which is intended to enable the execution of the bioeconomy strategy. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to scale up the National Data Center, which is now operational, and to mitigate and modernize the government ICT architecture. Furthermore, funding has been secured for building a data recovery center. Mr. Speaker, the significantly large investment that government has made in the road transport infrastructure is a reasonable measure of success over the past years. Through the support of government's development partners, further road infrastructure improvements will be carried out, including the construction of the Manzini Golf Course interchange. The service roads along the MR3 highway will, once fully completed, help to ease the traffic congestion along this corridor, as it has proved to be the backbone of the country's road transport network. Despite some challenges faced during the implementation of certain projects, such as the Nhlangano-Skunuza Road, it remains imperative that such projects be completed and that government is currently addressing these issues relating to these projects. To ensure the lifespan of such investments is protected, there is a need to set up a roads maintenance agency. Mr. Speaker, the railway subsector continues to be the major mode for the transportation of bulk commodities. An expansion of the existing network is therefore necessary to increase the cargo handling capacity from the current estimated 6 million metric tons per annum to 14 million metric tons per annum, with the operationalization of the Stogot-Luthe link. The link is a new line that traverses about 100 kilometers in Eswatini, and the connection on the South African side is about 47 kilometers. Preliminary work on the project has commenced. To prepare this route for construction, 253 project-affected properties have to be resettled. Eswatini Railways has earmarked on the expansion of the Matsapa dry port. Funds amounting to $969,000 have been sourced from the Republic of China and Taiwan to finance the development of the architectural designs and feasibility study for the project. Mr. Speaker, the Eswatini Civil Aviation Authority continues to engage potential businesses to invest and operate within the civil aviation sphere in areas of airline establishment. to increase commercial activity at KM3 Airport and to implement the Special Economic Zone program within the KM3 International Airport area. We need to ensure that all these operations at the airport and in the country's airspace meet the licensing requirements and the expectations of the industry through a safe, secure, environmentally friendly and sustainable operations. Mr. Speaker, government endeavours to create more employment and attract foreign direct investment with the intention to catalyse industrialisation for sustainable economic growth and poverty alleviation. Meaningful growth will be achieved by enabling the private sector to lead and do what it does best, growing our economy and creating employment. Mr. Speaker, the recently launched strategic roadmap is government's commitment to catapult the country into a growth path that will channel every Eswatini into productive economic activities. Electricity and internet affordability remain key priorities for government to stimulate the private sector growth and productivity. Therefore, government will expedite the national plans for promoting local production of electricity to reduce the cost of power. We will continue to promulgate pro-business policies in an effort to bolster the operating environment. This will enhance the potential of the private sector to contribute towards economic growth and employment creation. A vibrant private sector will lead to improved food security, access to affordable internet and communication services, a thriving renewable energy industry, increased tourism, and full utilization of our preferential trade agreements. Mr. Speaker, government continues to foster the development and promotion of MSMEs. Notable milestones is the Manzini Trade Hub construction, the Informal Traders Revolving Fund, leather and leather products developments, and participation in international forums advancing the agenda of MSMEs, growth and promotion. The promotion of MSMEs, however, is dependent on support to access affordable finance, advisory services, infrastructural support, and the availability of a skilled labour force. Mr. Speaker, MSMEs face a relatively acute challenge in terms of retaining and attracting their workforce. Inability to meet internationally accepted quality standards remains one of the major challenges for our MSMEs with regards to penetration or access to international markets for their products. Government has not only entered into various trade agreements, but has taken innumerable steps to ensure the growth and promotion of the industrial sector. In order to assist MSMEs to access international markets, a national quality assurance infrastructure has been set up to strengthen their capacity to provide international best practices and standards. New trade opportunities are being created for the business sector to take advantage of trade agreements, such as the Economic Cooperation Agreement between the Kingdom of Eswatini and the Republic of China on Taiwan, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will become operational in July 2020. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to build resilient public financial management systems and procedures, as these are key requirements for any government to develop a sound financial policy. The rollout of the Public Financial Management Act of 2017 provides a legal foundation to the 21st century PFM practices. The rollout of the PFM Act is a continuous process that requires training of civil servants on the adoption of the new regulations and IT systems as we migrate to new PFM practices. Mr. Speaker, to support the full compliance of the PFM Act of 2017, we'll continue implementing the Integrated Financial Management Information System that we refer to as IFMIS, replacing the existing system. The IFMIS will serve as an effective platform to implement many provisions of the PFM Act, particularly accurate and timely reporting. The procurement of the vendor to supply the IFMIS system has commenced and will be completed in the first quarter of the financial year 2020-2021. Mr. Speaker, security has a direct impact on investment growth, social and human capital, and protection of public institutions. Government will continue ensuring responsiveness and effectiveness in the sphere of safety and security through the use of science and information technology. The aim is to reduce contemporary crime and address state security challenges. Support to our security forces as we pursue economic stability and growth in the country is key to sustainable development of our nation. This budget seeks to strengthen public order management and state security systems, which are important factors in ensuring that the country's safety and security landscape is conducive for investment. Mr. Speaker, government enacted a Small Claims Court Amendment Act of 2019 in a bid to operationalize the Act of 2011 for the adjudication of small commercial cases. The courts will assist in reducing the backlog of civil cases and settlement of civil disputes. These courts will also have a positive effect in achieving excellence in improving access to justice and contribute to the country's development. Mr. Speaker, corruption remains an impediment towards sustainable economic development in our kingdom. Government has reinforced the fight against corruption and crime by providing for the civil forfeiture of illicit gotten assets as guided by the Prevention of Organised Crime Act of 2018. This will be achieved through the establishment of the Asset Forfeiture Unit and Asset Recovery Committee under the Director of Public Prosecutions. Proceeds of any criminal activity will be traced and forfeited to the state. As a country, we cannot afford to lose a single cent through crime and corruption if we are to achieve our objective of zero tolerance to corruption. Inkhohlakalo yindzaba yethu sonke. We shall call the nation to assist in preventing and eradicating corruption by using whatever means of technology at one's disposal and to expose the perpetrators. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Auditor General will continue to provide assurance and accountability through audits to promote transparency and good governance. Government will continue to support institutional capacity building initiatives in this public office. This year's budget includes an allocation for an audit system which will expand the scope and coverage of audits to include technical, capital, and other audits. A special budget of 8 million emalangeni has been provided to undertake forensic audits for some selected capital projects. Mr. Speaker, government continues to be committed to protecting the basic human rights of citizens. This includes, but is not limited to, the rights of health, social care, education, and all other interdependent rights, including economic rights. This is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals that we refer to as SDGs, with a particular focus on the most vulnerable citizens of our country. Further, the need to ensure gender equality in the implementation of the SDGs cannot be overemphasized. Mr. Speaker, revenue forecasts for 2020-21 financial year are projected to be 21.2 billion emalangeni, indicating an 18.4% increase from the 17.6 billion in 2019-2020 financial year collection. A number of factors underpin the expected increase in collection. In particular, SACA receipts are expected to be 8.34 billion emalangeni, which is a 32.5% increase from the 6.3 billion 2019-2020 financial year amount. Mr. Speaker, in addition, these figures account for several proposed policy measures that were aimed at increasing revenue receipts. The timely approval of increases in taxation of alcohol and tobacco products, lotteries and gaming, road tolls and fuel have seen revenue shifting on a slightly upward trend. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure for the financial year 2020-2021 is estimated at 24.1 billion emalangeni. This includes an amount of 2 billion for public debt payments. Appropriated recurrent expenditure is set to grow by 238 million emalangeni compared to 2019-2020 financial year, now standing at 16.2 billion emalangeni. The capital budget allocation is 6.4 billion emalangeni in 2020-2021, which is an increase of 12.4% compared to the 2019-2020 financial year. Thus, the total expenditure for financial year 2020-2021 is 2.2 billion emalangeni above the budget expenditure for 2019-2020, which is a 10.6% increase. Mr. Speaker, the budget deficit for the financial year 2020-2021 is projected at 3.6% of GDP. Our fiscal deficit is estimated to be 2.9 billion in 2020-2021 financial year. This figure is in line with the SADC macroeconomic deficit targets to not exceed 5%, and government intends to lower it further in the medium term. Mr. Speaker, by virtue of the responsibility entrusted in me as a Minister of Finance, and now present to this August House the budget estimates for 2020-2021 financial year. Revenue and grants, 21.2 billion emalangeni. Appropriated recurrent expenditure, 16.15 billion emalangeni. Appropriated capital expenditure, 6.38 billion emalangeni. Total expenditure, 24.08 billion emalangeni, and a deficit of 2.88 billion emalangeni. In conclusion, I'd like to quote a scripture from Galatians 6 verse 9. Let us not become weary of doing good, but at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. To our international development partners, multilateral organizations, and NGO community, we appreciate your continued support and commit to a new era of active engagement and implementation to ensure the outcomes we all desire. All levels of government will be held accountable for transparent, responsive communication and delivery of our responsibilities as your partner. Your technical and financial assistance is invaluable to supporting the economic recovery we speak of today. We acknowledge that in order to continue receiving impactful international assistance, improvements are required internally. This budget seeks to ensure the necessary social, financial, and structural reforms are achieved without compromising our national values. We'll continue our efforts towards qualifying for the Millennium Challenge Corporation funding and strengthen our collaboration with our esteemed cooperating partners such as the African Development Bank, the UN agencies, the European Union, the World Bank, the Government of Japan, USAID, the Government of India, the IMF, the Government of the Republic of China and Taiwan, PEPFAR, and the Global Fund. With government's commitment to fully enable and support a private sector-led recovery, we invite business leaders, both local and international, to engage with a fresh, free market-focused Eswatini. Efforts towards improving the ease of doing business will continue in order to enhance the enabling environment that will support existing businesses and create new local industries. The base of this budget guarantees that the new wealth created will be distributed throughout all levels of society, truly impacting each Leswati positively. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend this budget to you and once again allow me to express my appreciation for the support and cooperation I've received in the preparation of this budget from my colleagues in Cabinet under the leadership of His Excellency the Right Honourable Prime Minister, the Finance Committee of Parliament, members of staff for the central agencies and staff from line ministries. I thank you all and happy Valentine's Day. I'm sweating. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll grab some now. Thanks.
So, we come to the end of today's business. So, on the 19th, that is Wednesday, it will be about each date.
Wednesday. Eish.
Also, the finance session and committee in
Are you ready to close first? You got to.
And then there's also been an
connect with it.
Yes, the implications and areas.
Sise parliament bekunene lapho khona ke indvuna yetiko letemafa Neil Rickenback uqedza ke kwethula ke inkulumo yakhe emaphakelo etimali eminyaka ke yanga 2020 kuya ke kumnyaka wanga 2021 indvuna ke isiqedile ke speech sayo bekunene lebesikhathe ke singemakhasi langemashumi ke lasihlanu a 50-page document compared to a 41-page document which he delivered last year. Kuyasho ke ukuthi kuyasetshenzwa bekunene ngoba magama achaza ke tinhlelo nalokho ke uhulumende lakafisa ke kwenda njengoba sikukhulumisa lama documents lawo iyabonakala lena ukuthi beyinako ke kucina in terms of the things that government wanted to articulate to the relevant different stakeholders in terms of resources allocation and policy direction that the country is going to take in the financial year of 2020-2021. Interesting highlights, of course, and one of those which is the one that we see on our screens right now, which is the ARV allocation of 204 million emadangeni that our government has allocated to ensure that our fight against HIV and AIDS is practically strengthened. Siyathi ke ukuthi live lakithi litimisele ukuthi kufike kumnyaka wanga 2022 indzaba ye HIV and AIDS ibeke seyingekho, and one of those programs and aspirations by our government is to ensure that people that are HIV positive no longer die out of the virus, which is why government is allocating so much money in this particular case, which is 204 million emalangeni, to make sure that we buy the necessary medication to suppress the virus to those that are living with it. And interestingly, of course, and most appreciatively is the fact that sibona imali yabo gogo nabomkhulu ke iyenyuka isuka ke emakhulwini ke lamane iya ke emakhulwini ke la ngemakhulwini ke lasihlanu 4 to 500 emalangeni imali setawutholwa ke ngibo bogogo nabomkhulu. Dr. Chongwa, when the Minister of Finance delivers his speech, you know, it is not just an event or occasion that he does for Parliament. As we can see, when he's in Parliament, he's got cabinet ministers, the Prime Minister himself, and other different stakeholders, key people in our country's economy. But he's basically speaking to the entire Eswatini, which is why also an organization like ourselves, Eswatini TV, has found it fit to actually live broadcast this event. You know, your sentiments about the minister's speech?
Well, to me, it's an upgrade. I've taken note. Almost, it's action oriented. And not only that, I've also noted that it is very proactive because it touches almost the key areas. It touches the educational part, the human capital development part. It touches the issues of social security. It touches also the part of health, and also it balances on the issues of investment. It also has a very good notion and emphasis on the SME part, which is, to me, it is quite action oriented, and I think it is even an upgrade to the previous one.
Of course. Dr. Chongwa, I think for me, you are an esteemed economist, you know. What we will see in the next day or so, 2 days, 1 week, even the entire month, you know, we will see different stakeholders actually sharing their views, their sentiments, some actually commenting on their positives and their highlights in the minister's speech. You know, one of the things we need to really look at is if the minister and his cabinet team have actually continued to focus on issues of importance, like the rationalizing of expenditure, which was a key priority when they came to the office. And one of those was also the issues of fiscal consolidation. You know, does this budget indicate a way that government still wants to strengthen programs to rationalize expenditure, consolidate fiscal consolidation policies and strategies? You know, can we say that we have seen an indication of this in terms of how our expenditure is looking like in terms of recurrent expenditure and how the deficit is looking like, allocation to capital expenditure and so on and so forth?
Yes, okay, when the new government came in with its policies, at first actually it raised a lot of suspicion because it was too good to be good.
Yeah.
But now we have seen their results. We have seen the deficit reducing on the other hand. Then on the other hand, we have also seen the revenue projection has shot up to about 2.6. Then on the other hand of the mixed feelings from the stakeholder, it is very, very normal. Actually, in economics, we've got two statements. We've got the normative statements, then we've got also positive statements. So normativity in such issues of economic development is very, very welcome. But on the other hand, it is also an indication of participatory governance or stakeholder engagement. So government can actually take advantage of this kind of platform and to see how they can even engage the stakeholder to have a more consolidated economic growth structure. Why am I saying this? We don't want a situation whereby the government is separate from the people itself, but people must participate and ensure that at the end of the day there is kind of a positive impact on economic development part.
Yeah. And I like the fact that the minister was being honest about some of the inefficiencies that exist within administrative policies and other management systems within government. And one of those he highlights as structural efficiencies, which government will try by all means to eliminate. You know, when we say structural inefficiencies within government, what are we talking about? I don't know if you as an economist have noted some of those structural inefficiencies.
Basically, we are talking about the output of the service of the public service sector vis-a-vis what government spends on that particular. The Honourable Minister also highlighted the issues of the wage bill, that it is still a problem, but at least it has been addressed with a good degree. So when we talk about structural efficiency issues, we are basically talking about how can we improve sectors of service delivery vis-a-vis the resource mobilization. We have seen notable areas, especially in the issues of digital migration. Information access now, even on the government website, is almost easily accessible. And also the Honourable Minister mentioned the issues of electrification aspect. We have, in this year's budget, we see that even a priority has been given to address the issues of energy management, both on the electricity part and also the oil industry which is being established. So these issues, if well consolidated, then definitely the cost, this is a very good term, the cost of managing the economy is going to be low.
Yeah, and just to give you a few highlights in comparison to what the year 2019-2020 was looking like and what the year 2020-21 is looking like. In the year 2019-2020, revenue and grants stood at 18.86 billion emalangeni, and in the year 2020-2021, the revenue and grant is projected at 21.0 billion. What does this mean, Dr. Chongwa? Last year, revenue and grants stood at 18.86 billion. In 2020-21, it's 21.20 billion. What could this potentially mean?
Like I said in the first place, that when the government said we are going to do this, we thought they were lying. But the results indicate a very, very positive trend. Yeah. And it's a big margin within a year from 18 billion to 21 billion of revenue collection, which means our systems are getting efficient, and which means it's a better sign. We are expecting even to see better things to come, both in the short term and in the long run. Yeah. So in the finance language, what does this mean? Does this mean we have more resources with which to finance the activities that we have compared to the previous period? Yeah, okay. Basically, it means two things. Sometimes we may not say we have enough resources because the economy is also growing exponentially. So what we're trying to say is our revenue collection has improved, because without poor revenue structures, then the entire economy will collapse. Of course. And maybe let's move to the next one, Dr. Chongwa. In appropriated recurrent expenditure, 2019-2020 period stood at 14.90 billion. Maybe just define quickly for us what appropriated recurrent expenditure is, and then maybe we can contrast it with the 2020-2021 period. Yeah, first of all, you'll see that it has also gone up from 14 billion to 16 billion. Yeah. But this is a recurrent expenditure. It's basically like current expenditure that we use on daily basis to run the economy. Mostly this is usually on a monthly basis. Now it is appropriated in the event that it is allocative. So we have to know which one it's the biggest meat at the end of the day, but it is allocative recurrent expenditure, like on salaries.
Yeah.
It has also gone up.
Yeah, I see also that appropriated capital expenditure has increased from 5.77 billion to 6.38 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what does this potentially mean also?
This basically, when we talk about capital expenditure, to me, it's a benefit, because once we have got a high capital expenditure, basically we're talking about investment spending going up. And once we've got a high capital expenditure, the chances of us having a higher multiplier effect returns on what we have spent on capital items is going to be high. It would have been a danger thing, John, if we had a reduction on the capital expenditure. But on the other hand, if we look, it's basically a 1 billion difference in terms of capital expenditure. And then when you look at the margin, it's about 2 billion margin on appropriate recurrent expenditure. Now you see, if it was the other way around, if we have had, for example, 2 billion increase on capital expenditure and 1 billion increase on recurrent expenditure, then we'll be saying that our economy, we are spending within our means.
Yeah, and I think it shows some signs of growth. I don't know if it's still reflective of the 2.6% midterm growth we were talking about, because if you look at the total expenditure for the financial year 2019-2020, it stood at 21.83 billion, and in the financial year 2020-2021, it stands at 24.08 billion. Emalangeni. Is this indicative of an economy that's growing, or it is indicative of a burden that the government is carrying?
We cannot judge from total expenditure. That's
cannot.
why we have to divide it into capital expenditure and recurrent.
Yeah.
The key part there are two things: the recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure. Capital expenditure has got a multiplier progressive effect. Understand that point? Multiplier progressive effect. Recurrent expenditure has got a regressive effect. Regressive effect meaning you are eating into our own pace, like the wage bill. Actually, here on the recurrent expenditure, the biggest,
that's where you find the wage bill.
The wage bill, yes,
Yeah.
because it's recurrent.
Yeah.
But if we had a big capital expenditure, then we know that both in the short term and in the long run term, our finances are going to be covered.
Yeah, but nonetheless, what is our government trying to do increasing the capital expenditure in the current financial period compared to the previous period? If we look at the current period, it's 6.38 billion compared to 5.77 billion. This is a positive.
Yes.
It doesn't matter the margin.
Yes, yeah, it doesn't matter. Actually, that's why I'm saying it is progressive.
Yeah.
Except that sometimes the resources, when they're making structural adjustments, it's not a short-term thing, it's a progressive thing, because you can affect other sectors that can bring about social discord. Let's take, for example, the cola challenge that we have had. Government had to nurse that quite well. Otherwise, if we could make a drastic change, then automatically would destabilize the economy again. So with this 1 billion increase, it's a very positive trend.
Yeah, and I can see government has also made an attempt to reduce the deficit.
Yes.
What is the definition of a deficit within government planning processes? Last year we stood at 2.98 billion, and that was our deficit. In the current period, it stands at 2.88 billion, and the margin is there, but I don't know if it's significant. But I can see government is making an indication or an attempt to reduce the deficit, because this is the second or third year running that our government has been seen reducing the deficit. Is this a positive, Dr. Chongwa?
Yeah, okay. Basically, if you do statistics, you'll find that maybe the significance value is 0.0 something.
Yeah.
That's a significance value. But usually the significance value must be 1. So this one, to me, I can say it's relevant.
Yeah.
Because we are still in the 2 billion deficit.
Yeah. It has not increased.
No.
Which could have been a
because,
downside.
Because deficit, remember, it must reduce.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. So the fact that we have maintained it, again, it is a sign of improvement. It's better to maintain it where it is or bring it down. If we increase the deficit margin, then we know that we are again having a serious fiscal and monetary problem.
Kanti ke indzaba lenkulu lengathemba ukuthi amaswati afuna lokuyiva indzaba ye cost of living adjustment ingabe ithene indvuna ngemaphakelo ke la bekelwe nje indzaba ukuthi uhulumende ke ufuna ke kwaba ke imali etawukhona ke kwenyusa ke imali etawumelana ke nekukhula ke kwesimo semnotho lokulesikubita ngesilungu ukuthi cost of living adjustment. The minister has indicated that government has set aside 227 million emalangeni in the current financial period to actually allocate it to appropriating it to the cost of living adjustment, and I do hope that this now answers questions to a multitude of Maswati whether or not we are going to be seeing a cost of living adjustment in our salaries in the current financial period, as the Prime Minister did allude to last year when he addressed the nation to say, I think definitely this year we are going to be making an allocation towards the cost of living adjustment. I-budget yeminyaka lophelile ema-estimates ayo ke bekangakhombisi ke a single cent towards an allocation of the cost of living adjustment. What could this potentially mean, Dr. Chongwa? I don't want to get into the behind the scenes and all the dialogue that's going on about it, assuming this is a fair increase, when we get a cost of living adjustment, it means a positive to the economy.
Yes. Basically, we have to understand it from this angle, the consumption, spending part. Once the consumption spending goes up, then definitely inflation issues also are going to rise, and then they're going to have a constraint on production. That's got a higher reactive effect. So by virtue of doing something about the cost of living at the collar, to me it's meaning that the government took into consideration and make appropriate adjustments on recurrent expenditure. So it is a good move. It would have been quite dangerous if nothing has been done this year. But the fact that they have intervened, because I think is it for the past 2 years, isn't it? There has never been a collar. Now that they are doing it on the third year, it is a positive trend as well, because remember that we have the biggest wage bill, and this wage bill consumes per month. You can imagine
a substantial amount of
very big one,
now let's just quickly, before we take a break, Dr. Chongwa, His Majesty actually proclaimed that this financial year as the year of the small and micro medium enterprises, and I think the minister is also reinforcing the same narrative from His Majesty the King. When we say this has to be the year of SME, small and micro medium enterprises, what does it potentially mean to our economy? And I think the minister also indicated that if we are going to be serious about making this the year of SMEs, we also need to come up with strategies and incentivize this particular sector. What are some of the incentives that we are likely to see coming out of such programs that reinforce the narrative that this year is the year of small and micro medium enterprises?
I think number one, here's the Honorable Minister of Commerce mentioned the things like, we need to strengthen the capital market linkages issues. Also, he mentioned the issues of the inclusive financing, coming up with a better inclusive financing strategy. Apart from that, he also highlighted that there will be need to bring about a better way of to reduce the ease of doing business, because at the moment the ease of doing business in the country is a little bit quite constrained. Then also this now borrows into this goes back to His Majesty's speech, the speech from the throne, where he emphasized that we need to promote an ecosystem that is inclusive by nature, meaning we need to have a system for entrepreneurs which is an enabling environment, so that at the end of the day we'll be able to have more people engaged in production.
When our government says it is serious about making sure that development comes from our various Tinkula centers, it is now also indicated in this particular budget, and the minister was actually expecting Parliament to give him an applause because of his efforts to make sure that intuthuko iqhamuka khona ke Tinkundleni imali ke lebeyake sikhwameni esathiwa ukuthi ke i-Regional Development Fund emaphakelweni etimali eminyaka wanga 2019-2020 bekungu 110 million emalangeni. This amount has been increased substantially, rising up to 177 million emalangeni. This also, for me, Dr. Chongwa, speaks to a government that's serious about seeing development being inclusive, coming from grassroots levels.
Yes, besides that, it should be, if I'm not mistaken, in statistics, between 75 to 80% of the Maswati, they live in a rural community. So that is already a potential for human capital development.
Yeah.
So if we have enough money going to rural community development, we need to make sure that those particular communities, they become productive enough through capacity building and various measures and techniques that will make them even multiply the money that has been injected in them. The danger is when we allocate so much money for rural development, then there is no multiplier mechanism there.
Yeah.
In the long run, we are going to have a situation whereby consumption patterns will be dependent and not multiplicative. So by virtue of this, it's a challenge to the Tinkrunda administrators to come up with very, very creative and innovative way of how this money can be multiplied and sustainable at the same time.
A quick one, Dr. Chongwa. Someone could say, why is government allocating so much money to education? As a matter of fact, we are meeting the 15% benchmark of government of total government expenditure.
Yes.
Someone could say, why don't we invest this money into agriculture and be a food secure nation as per our aspirations? Why is education a key sector? Even by international standards, we are required to make sure we allocate at least 15% of our expenditure, of our total expenditure to education as opposed to other key areas like agriculture, your ICT, and so on and so forth.
Mr. John and dear listeners, you cannot run an economy on an empty head.
You cannot.
You can't. You can't. Education, we are here because of education.
Yeah.
And I'm coming from Zambia. During the time of Dr. Kaunda, the education system was really powerful. And we could see now, so by virtue of prioritizing this, except that we have to have an inclusive approach towards education. It must not be a classroom only based education. But I'm very glad the Minister of Education introduced what we call the competence based system. And the competence based system talks about skills, values, and attitude development. Meaning we are breeding a crop of people who will be patriotic about their country. And this is what the Chinese government did. You go and study the 50-year plan for China. They focused on building that patriotism among themselves. So in the long run, I see this to be a very, very sustainable effect.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chongwa. Stawu kunyake mathe maswatla mahle kodwa nje lokuvela kwela ukuthi ngamunye wethu kunenzima ke lekumele ukuthi ayidlale lehambelana nekuthi senda ini kuteke sicinise ke letinhlangothi lapho khona uhulumende sekabe ke netimali lokufaka ekhathi ke lihlangothi ke noma ke lihlangothi ke lwetekulima khona ke ekhaya Eswatini. The amount of money that our government has allocated, if you listen closely or look closely to the minister's speech, also talks to issues of training, of capacity building, of subsidies and so on and so forth, to make sure ukuthi liswati leli nemhlaba lithi lifuna kulima uhulumende uthi imali ikhona ema inputs ungawathola bese ke uyaqala kulima, as opposed to finding yourself in a constrained position financially where you cannot afford these farming inputs because they are very expensive. And I think one of the issues also where we still have a challenge as a country is to make sure that we exploit to its maximum capacity or potential the bilateral and trade agreements that we have with other countries. If you look at our export quota as a country, 69% of our exports only go to the African continent. How about the rest of the world? It does say we still have a market that is untapped in terms of what we need to be producing and taking to the rest of the world. And interestingly, we do have a lot of international trade agreements which we have not even started to explore. But we shall take a quick break and we will be back, and we need to follow up and get some reactions of what's happening down at Parliament, particularly the key ministries whose allocations we have just given you in terms of what the different and relevant ministers are saying pertaining to those allocations.
Standard Bank, moving forward.
Awingathi-ke libandla kithi-ke sesiyawulilekelela ngakhona ngala etindlini tekusakada lesibuke khona-ke eParliament. Bekunene sikhulumisa-ke indzaba yemaphakelo etimali. Ngiye ngibe nalo mcondvo yokuthi esikhathini lesinyenti makwetfulwa-ke tinkulumo tichamuka from the highest offices in the country, which include the Minister of Finance. We need to actually try and disseminate, or try and discern the outlook or the atmosphere that the speech or creates within all of us. We do pick a sense of some optimism and some positives coming up from this speech. Kukhona lapho khona besiye sithi masibuka i-budget speech yethu ma-budget estimates ukhanze ukuthi le deficit ishaya kumbele kubo 4 to 5 billion, 6 billion emalangeni sometimes. Here we are today as a country, we are talking about a deficit that is steadily decreasing as the years go by. Yes. And we are talking about a country that's coming from a situation where for 2 consecutive years it had not been able to appropriate a cost of living adjustment allocation, and this year we are talking about all those kind of things. Like I'm saying, Dr. Chongwa, if you were an economist and you were just sitting listening to the speech, taking your notes and sitting in front of a media fraternity, what are your views, your sentiments in terms of the outlook and the atmosphere that this speech is creating?
First of all, we just have to thank the government for having worked so hard. We are not, in Africa, we are not too good at thanking, But if I was given an opportunity, I wish to thank the government of Eswatini, honestly, as an independent person. They have worked tirelessly. The economy was on its knees. We are independent analysts and we've got the objectivity to analyze things from the outside perspective. The economy was worrying, but it has been rebarated. And what they have even highlighted, the Honorable Minister of Finance said, we shall continue. I got those words, meaning they are on a positive trend, and if you can look at the socio-economic analysis, they don't bow down easily to pressure, external pressure, but eventually they take into consideration of those social demands like the civil service, which has been demanding so much on the part of recurrent spending. So basically what I'm trying to say is, I think if there is any way, we have to appreciate what government has done for us. And this will also, not only that, help us even to become more patriotic of making sure that this trend that has already been set does not go back. Just look at how they managed to control deficit. Our deficit is in billions. And most of the time, if you look at the Swaziland, Eswatini budgets, almost every year we've got a supplementary. What does it mean from an independent analyst? A supplementary means sometimes a high level of uncertainty. Then the high level of uncertainty has got negative implications, especially on the FDIs, because the economic growth is not predictable. So how can I come and invest? So by virtue of having reduced the deficit part, which means they're increasing the level of certainty, then what are they doing in the long run? You're also increasing the level of investment confidence. So to me, it's a thumbs up.
Yeah. Another highlight for me. Yes, we received this with a level or spirit of optimism,
yes,
but we still need to exercise a pinch of caution.
Yes, yes.
The minister did mention the fact that the world economy is on a downward trend.
Yes.
If you look at some of these major external factors that are currently prevailing, including what's happening in China,
yes,
like you did mention that this could affect trade partners in the world market.
Yes.
We may also be affected, and how do we protect ourselves from such kind of shocks? If the world's economy is on a downward trend and we are already observing certain external shocks such as the coronavirus and so on and so forth, how do we protect ourselves to make sure that, yes, we are making some slight gains steadily, but we need to also caution ourselves in terms of making sure that we do not make suffer some setbacks as as the economy maybe exercises signs of unpredictability.
Diversification is the key.
Diversification.
Because diversification, you develop more of self-reliant. the entire world will come and knock on your door because you have diversified. Now, diversification, unfortunately, it is somehow misunderstood because people think diversification is simply to change. If you are producing maize, now you're producing potatoes or whatever. Diversification talks about integration. Integration reduces the level of cost of production. At the same time, it increases efficiency. That is integration. Now, if you look at we'll talk about issues of institutional capacity building at the end of the day. So once we capacitate institutions, what I'm trying to say is very practical. Let's take, for example, you want to open a business. You go to Ministry of Commerce. They say, no, before you go to SRA, they say, no, go to SEDCO. So we're being tossed around. But if we can have a hybrid economy whereby everything is done under one roof and it is well integrated, then definitely diversification will be the way to go. I'm speaking out of empirical evidence. The only countries that have diversified and their models have worked in Africa, which we can learn from them, is Tanzania, Ethiopia, and I think Mauritius, if I'm not mistaken. These countries are way above, and their economies are growing between 6 to 7% per year.
Yeah. It's always good to hear our leaders talking about the effects of climate change,
Yes.
which the minister is also mentioning in his speech, and it does say this is also a risk to the gains that we are making. If we are making gains on the other side, and yet we've got factors which we have no control over, such as climate change. I don't know if as economists, if there is a way to mitigate the effects of climate change, because we could be making gains and then also be making some serious losses because of what we cannot control.
Yeah, with R&D, it comes back to research and development. Research and development, it informs the policymakers about what is yet to come. And then after that, we use technology to intervene for the future. Let's take, for example, on the agriculture aspect, we invest on we invest on greenhousing because it greenhouses the regulated temperature. But I'm very happy with the Honorable Speaker, Minister of Finance, said that the government has realized that climate change is a matter, is a factor, and they have actually begun to engineer efficient ways of how we can produce more in this current climate situation.
And before we round up, we have about 1 minute, Dr. Chongwa. The effects of low interest rates currently prevailing. This may be a positive. This may also be a downside.
Yeah.
This don't just apply on the domestic market, but it is just an international trend currently prevailing. When we have low interest rates such as we have now, what does it mean to the economy? Is it good for us, and which sectors are being affected by such kind of margins in terms of the interest rates?
Okay, when we have a low interest rate, we are attracting production because those in business will be able to borrow money at a cheaper cost, then the cost of production becomes low. But on the other hand, we're also stimulating consumption. And when consumption goes up, it usually overtakes production. Hence, it shoots up in terms of inflation. So when we have a low interest rate over a long period of time, then we know that we're in a danger zone. So we can only have low interest rate in a specific period of time, maybe in the short term of maybe first quarter of the year, then we begin to rise to discourage people to spend recklessly because the cost of spending will be very low.
Yeah. And I think my major worry is if you look the trade relationship between South Africa and China, with what's currently prevailing in China, and South Africa is a major trade partner with China, and we are also heavily reliant on trading with South Africa, and if they sort of like alter their monetary policy and things like that, it also could affect us at the same time. Are we ready for such an...
Not really. You see, for example, if we reduce low interest rate for FDI strategy or strategy, we are going to have a lot of investors here because it will be the cost of producing, as I said, it will be cheaper here, and this is what Eswatini is doing is very correct, because the biggest competitor to our country is South Africa. Let's take, for example, an investor wants to come and invest in the southern region of Africa. Our Malangeni is equal to rand. So which means, of course, on the monetary exchange advantage, there's no difference. So what other things, now an investor will ask, what other things can I benefit? So he's going to check on the interest rate. You discover that, in Eswatini, the interest rates are very low, despite having at a par. So we'll benefit more, especially in the long run. In the short run, we may not really benefit much. So the fact that government has introduced low interest rate is a strategic move to actually, we're going even to have more investors leaving South Africa coming here. It is like depegging. If we depeg, then we have depreciated our currency, then we're going to attract more investors. So since we have not depegged, we just have to reduce interest, which is a reduction on the cost of production. So it's again another thumbs up. So I'm very excited with this kind of strategy which the government is bringing into play.
Of course. And as we conclude, we are also going to borrow from the words of the Minister Neil Rickenback in his conclusion statement, where he said, let us not weary be of doing good, for the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So if we are going to continue and be steadfast in our efforts to actually help even our government, taking from the words of His Majesty the King to say, let us use our gifts and talents. This was basically a call to each and everyone as citizens of this country to say, we each one of us has a role to play, and we all have an innate potential or ability to actually contribute towards the activities of this country to make sure it becomes the country that we want it to be. Let us not be weary of doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a reward if we do not give up. I think this speaks of endurance in terms of our mental strength, our efforts and everything. In time we are going to be seeing, and we do pray that God keeps us so that at least in time we can reflect to a 5-year period and say we saw the deficit coming from 6 billion to probably half a billion emalangeni in the next few years, as our government's efforts to fiscally consolidate its efforts are beginning to show. Eswatini, thank you so much for joining us on this live broadcast. Singaba kusho nje amaswahili amahle ukuthi umsakazo utawuqhubeka ke unikhombise ikakhulu kade ke etindzabeni tethu ngensimbi yesikhombisa lomhla kusihlwa lapho khona ke libandla letinsatheli litabe ke likupha ematiko ngematiko lokuthi ingabe imali tiphakelwe ke kanjani kunima manje ukuthi nithi lanzeleke tindzaba nakuletinye ke tinhlelo lifaka ekhathi ke luhlelo lesiba nalo ngelisonto embili kanye lapho siphinde siwabuke kahle ke lamaphakelo kumbe sesibuka ke ematiko lokuthi aphakelwe kanjani kutawusisa kanjani ke futhi lokho ke embili. Thank you so much Eswatini. Dr. Chongwa, thank you so much for coming through and for sharing your insights with us on the program here today.
Thank you so much Mr. John, and dear listeners, it's an honor to participate in the development of this country.
Kunjalo ke maswahla mahle sekunifisela nje ukuthi awungathi ilanga ke lingaba lihle, Jehova sigcine side ke sibonane ngalokudako siphilile. Nisale kahle.
Standard Bank, moving forward.